This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. We got a banger for you heading into a marble race to officially begin the weekend at the end of the program. Couple of our faves on the show today. Wiebe's World himself, Ken Wiebe, with his weekly visit. Get Ken's thoughts on the Stanley Cup playoffs and more on the Winnipeg Jets offseason. And Scott Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun as well before Wiebe coming in. Now, we've been excitedly looking forward to the debut of the Winnipeg Sea Bears this weekend. Home opener tomorrow night. The team will break a CEBL attendance record with their first game at Canada Life Centre. We're looking forward to that. And, you know, after having Mo on to talk about the league a little bit yesterday, great chance to catch up with one of our favorites on the program today, Kirby Schepp, the head coach over at the U of M men's basketball team, and also moonlighting as the director of development for the Egyptian Basketball Federation. Before Kirby heads overseas, though, he's going to jump on with us today, talk a little bit about what the CEBL means for local basketball and what a boost it is for programs like his over at the U of M, as well as one of his players that was the first ever draft pick of the Sea Bears, and in Simon Hildebrand, who should have a big role with the club going forward. So we will talk a little hoops before we drop the marbles, focus in on some hockey talk, and of course some football talk as well. The Bombers opening the preseason on the weekend in Edmonton. Just before we get going, hit last night's playoff action and all the other big stories around the world of sports. Got to thank the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Assiniboia Downs, the Gold Eyes, who are back in action tonight, Canadian Club, Manitoba Battery, Aquatech, Modern Man, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health, Nick and Nicky DQ, F Apparel, Consolidated Supply, BP, Royal Sports, Breezy Bend Golf Course, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, and the award-winning Little Brown Jug Brewery, who have got some very exciting news for Bomber fans, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. Let's get after it, though, and welcome in Michael Remis, the brains of the operation. What is up, Remo? How about this heat? We got a heat warning in May here in Winnipeg. What is going on?
Yeah, I'm in short. This is my first show, I think, of 2023. You can't see it, but I'm wearing shorts under here. This is the first one for me. You know, normally I put on the sweatpants in the morning because it's a bit chilly. Not today. It was like 20. I said, okay, going with the shorts. I got the sweat shorts on, feeling comfortable. It's Friday. We're ready for the weekend. Going to be hot. This is good, Huss. I'm excited.
I'm in shorts as well. I cannot wait to get out. I've already had a day, to be honest with you. I was up far earlier than normal. I did a hit with Dusty and Eric on TSN 1260 in Edmonton, which was nearly interrupted by some extensive plumbing work being done.
Yeah, you told
me by one of the local services. We had quite an episode here. I'm not sure how this happened, whether it was involved with one of the other spots in my building. All I can tell you that it was near disaster. But shout out to the guys at Clean Line who came in and cleaned the line, if you will. And we're back. It
wasn't your fault. It was the guy above you, right? Or below you?
Listen, I really don't know. I really don't know. It's not something I have a lot of experience with. I'm not sure whether I put something down I don't know, like some paper towels or something. Look, like basically with the amount of work that went into this to fix the problem, I have a feeling it was something even more nefarious than that. Bottom line is, though, much like my betting slump, which has continued last night with the Golden Knights losing in overtime, I'm hoping that whatever happened with the pipes in my building, I hope that got out any bad juju that I'd had when it comes to the Coolbet lines and the lock shop going in. I've basically been in a slump, much like the Blue Jays have been. We'll get to that a little bit later on, though. Big game tonight, and I imagine quite a few Winnipeggers making the trip down to the Twin Cities for the series this weekend because, of course, it's Blue Jays at Twins, Reem, and that is always a busy weekend for Canadians to head down and see Canada's team take on the Twinkies there in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, they always schedule it near like May long weekend. This is the Memorial Day weekend in the States.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think it's
Party
big
time.
crowds. Yeah, going to be big crowds there, and I always enjoy watching those on TV. So I do know some people going down, making the trip. So I don't know if Ken's going, but that should be a good one on TV there.
That's a good question. Have we confirmed where Ken is joining us from today?
He's been on the golf course all week.
Well, the Manitoba Golf Tour for sure. But the Manitoba Golf Tour could turn into the Minnesota Golf Tour very quickly for Ken. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that he is heading down there for those games. Anyways, we'll talk to Wiebe a little later on. But as much as we will get to the sports news, let's get to what really matters right now on a Friday afternoon heading into the weekend. And that is the WST weather report, which includes a freaking heat warning. It's 30 degrees right now at 1 o'clock p.m. as we go live. And listen to this, man. A high of 32 today, 29 tomorrow, 32 on Sunday, 26 and 29 Monday, Tuesday, and then 34 degrees right now for Wednesday, May 31st and Thursday, June 1st. We will take it, considering the couple months leading into the couple months we had leading into the month of May. So it feels like summer right now. Gold Eyes are back in action tonight, beginning a series against the Sioux Falls Canaries. Great time to get out to the ballpark if you haven't already. And the Bombers are back as of tomorrow, Remo, taking on the Edmonton Elks in preseason action. And I'll tell you what, I got a chance to hook up with a number of the Bombers yesterday at, what was this event called yesterday? Taste of the Blue Bombers, a gourmet tailgate. And this was just an absolutely first-class event that the Bombers put on yesterday at the stadium. Got a chance to head down there and take it all in. 12 or 13 of the great restaurants of our city put together their own version on, quote, elevated tailgate fare. People had a couple drinks and basically walked through the entire stadium, sampling all of this great food. And needless to say, I'm just now hungry again after how much we ate at this event yesterday. But it also got me excited for the season. And I can tell you, talking to a number of the members of the Bombers yesterday at the event, they're looking forward to seeing people on the other side of the field other than their teammates now that training camp is pretty much done. And this team just wants to get after it. Fast forward to June 9th and get ready to start the unfinished business tour throughout the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, I'm fired up here for the Bombers season. I saw CFL has announcing revamped fantasy games on their website, which I think their fantasy game desperately needed that. They're calling it Game Zone. So, maybe we'll do something there. We do regular DraftKings contests for people who do want to play CFL fantasy with us. But I know for the Bombers, I was talking to Ted Wyman at the Kenny and Reddy party and whoever else covers the team, and they're struggling for stories. Not much in terms of position battles. The one we were looking forward to was who was going to be the kicker, but they signed Sergio Castillo before training camp, so they've really been counting down.
That's what I'm saying to Dusty and Eric today. I'm like, hey, if you're thinking about big Bomber stories tomorrow, look at guys on special teams in the second half tomorrow and look to see how the punters do, because as far as I can tell, it's Mark Leggio against the global punters for that punting job. And other than that, the band is pretty much back. Kenny Lawler is now back with the club, basically taking that Greg Ellingson spot in the receiving corps. And other than that, it is this Winnipeg Blue Bomber team that has set the bar so high in the last 3 years, falling just short in that last Grey Cup. And it seems like it's a very determined group that's looking forward to getting to work this weekend, and most importantly, in a couple weeks when the team opens against the Ticats and Bo Levi Mitchell here in the Peg.
Yeah, don't get hurt is the story of the preseason. And, Zach Collaros, I think it's unknown if he's actually going to play. Jeff Hamilton tweeting out, a lot of veteran players on the trip. Collaros is going to make it, but he says it's a big if he's going to take any snaps. And shout out to CFL as well, who did announce their CFL preseason live. That's been a big complaint about the league and TSN the last couple seasons, where not every preseason game was available. I mean, it's 2023. You got to make every game available. What is this? And you will be able to watch the Bombers Elks on CFL preseason live, cfl.ca/preseason live to sign up. I haven't looked too much into it, but the people in chat saying the reviews from last week were positive. And yes, that Bombers game the preseason game against Saskatchewan will be on TSN next Friday.
Yeah, that game will be, and Dusty's going to be coming in to call the game here in Winnipeg, and he'll be doing the game as well. I believe that is the audio feed that we will get for this CFL stream. Most of the times, I think they go with the home radio call, but in this case, I would expect to hear Dusty. So tomorrow afternoon, anyways, Bombers and Elks are going to go at it. And yeah, I mean, interesting looking at the roster that the team is sending out there. The ones are going. I mean, most of them are going. And I'll say this, if they're going to make the trip, I would imagine they will play. I think the concern against any team, but especially a Chris Jones coach team, might be, some players taking liberties or maybe a few cheap shots. So I think Zach Collaros probably gets in a series or two, but I also have a feeling he'll be getting rid of the ball very quickly and probably won't be in the game too much. I imagine we'll see more of Drew Brown, and then Josh Jones and Terrell Peroni will be the guys that probably get a chance to mix and match on some short yardage distances and see if they, there's your battle for the Bombers. Who's going to be the third string quarterback?
I thought the battle is who's going to take the Dakota Prukop / Sean McGuire role and vulture all these touchdowns and ruin
Brady Oliveira.
ruin fantasy. Yeah, ruin fantasy for Brady Oliveira. Andrew Harris, I think it cost him some money. They stole all his touch. Andrew Harris 2 years ago would take it down to the one. Then Sean McGuire would just punch it in every time. And didn't he lead the league in touchdowns? Crazy.
He led the Bombers in touchdowns, at least rushing TDs. I think he had 11 or 12. That was. Listen, you brought up CFL fantasy. Seeing you on a daily basis being so angered by Sean McGuire going in on the one was actually one of the most hilarious things that happened over and over and over again the entire season.
Well, I think Andrew Harris was getting annoyed. He'd literally take it down to the one, and then they'd give it to another guy to punch it in. So I'll shut up, and we can move on. The Bombers, did pretty well that season, so I think that's what it's more about. But for those of us who do dabble in fantasy, and it has helped me learn pretty much about the entire league, doing that every week. So I'm a big advocate for that. But looking ahead to the lineup, we'll get a look at what Kenny Lawler, Rashid Bailey, who's in there, Carlton Agadosi, all the same crew. So first one tomorrow, exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, not a ton of big Bomber stories. Just like you said, just stay healthy and be 100% for the beginning of the season. And we'll see how things work for next week's game as well. Speaking of which, this is Marbles Day today. I got to give a shout out to Joe over Consolidated Supply, who has given us a couple Bomber home opener tickets to give away. Now, we're going to wait until next Friday to do those, but we'll include that in the marble race. So Most of you know when to join us for marbles anyways, but especially if you're looking for a chance to win tickets to the home opener for the Blue and Gold, join us next week. Just before we move on to hockey, I will say this. Excellent food creations yesterday. I think the 529 Wellington one, I'm expecting that one to win. That was like a prime rib and lobster slider. It was decadently amazing. Confusion Corner had a great one. Nicolino's had a great one. And a restaurant I hadn't heard of, Elena, had some great meatball one. Peasant Cookery as well was in there. And I tried like a Korean corn dog. That was another one. And I should give a shout out to Jeff Gray. You know how every time we have guys on the program and whatever, I'll ask him about who eats the most or just some random question, just kind of more about, the guys. And they always say that Jeff Gray is the best cook. Jeff Gray himself had his own creation at the event yesterday. It was I'm not sure what was special about it, but it was essentially a corn dog with a special mustard. And I was actually beside Jeff as he got to try it himself after creating it. And it was 5-star. But overall, great food, great team, great people, and an unbelievably great day to do it. And getting into that stadium, it just got me more excited, even for the preseason game next week, just to get back to IG Field and get back on it with the Bombers season.
Yeah, that was Taste of the Bombers. They had a food event yesterday. I gotta hit that next year. I missed out, and it's funny. I just looked at the schedule. The schedule for the Bombers next Friday preseason game. I'm gonna be at the Beer Fest, the Flatlanders at the arena. So, I remember they have it. They would have like Stanley Cup playoff games on TV there. So I'm hoping that they do have it on throughout the concourse at the Flatlanders Beer Festival.
Oh, you mean the game? Yeah. Well, there won't be any Stanley Cup game because the Cup is not going to start on Wednesday. It'll start next Saturday because the Dallas Stars.
True. Well, you think the Stars? Well, you're saying the Stars are going to win the next game?
I think it was like
if the Stars
Dallas won that game.
No, they put out the release today. If Vegas wins Game 5, it starts Wednesday.
Oh, it still does Wednesday? Okay. I guess I was just looking at yesterday's announcement. It was if Vegas won that game, it was starting Wednesday. But I guess they will still. I would love for it to start Wednesday, and then there's 2 days off, and then Saturday will be Game 2. Well, Game 1 or Game 2, I guess.
Yeah, here's the schedule
next week.
People were asking us yesterday, what's the schedule like? Are they going to be off for a week? So if Vegas wins Game 5, it'll start Wednesday, May 31 in Vegas, and then Saturday, June 3rd. I find these 8 p.m. Eastern start times, and they did this in the Florida, Carolina. I think that's a bit late, no? 8 p.m. Eastern? Like, why not go 7 or 7:30 Eastern? I was kind of surprised because they had that
8 o'clock isn't too late. It's perfect for us. It's a 7 o'clock game
it's good
Central.
for us.
Once again, showing that the Central time zone is the best for sports watching. But I mean, that's it's still 5 o'clock Pacific. I mean, the minute when you're starting games at 4 p.m. in the Pacific time zone, I mean, there's a lot of people that are still at work. And hell, half of California has an hour and a half commute and all that traffic. So I guess maybe they can catch some of the game on the radio. But the bottom line from all of this is that we don't have a game for sure on Wednesday right now because the Dallas Stars survived last night. And I'm convinced the only reason it happened is because I picked Vegas to win the game last night. But there was Joe Pavelski. And what a story he's been. I mean, I know we've been talking about what the Florida Panthers have been doing in that incredible run from the 8th spot. When you think about Joe Pavelski's playoffs, getting knocked out in Game 1 of the first round, coming back in the second round with a 4-goal game and a losing cause, a huge part of their win over the Seattle Kraken. And then, listen, I still don't think that this gets back to Dallas for a Game 6, but Joe Pavelski helped Dallas avoid a humbling sweep at the hands of the Vegas Golden Knights and at least live to see another day after a big comeback OT win last night.
Yeah, huge pushback from Dallas, especially Jake Ottinger, who was upset after his performance. Great pushback. Yeah, great push. Very upset about his performance in game 3 and really rebounded yesterday. Joe Pavelski has most goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs among active players, passing Ovechkin yesterday, 73, and he's got the 5th most power play goals all time in Stanley Cup playoff history. This is he's been around for a while. He's on some great Sharks teams. Now he's at a couple runs here with Dallas, and huge impact. And another play has at the end of a game, or the Carolina, Florida, that was the end of regulation, like the tripping call, and they score Tkachuk on the power play to clinch the series. And there was another penalty yesterday where Dallas goes on a power play in overtime, and they win their first game of that series. We didn't really talk about it yesterday. I thought that penalty call, again, a lot of people didn't like it, the one on Stahl in Game 4. I didn't think it was that terrible, I thought the one yesterday, guy got high sticked in the face. Those are automatic. Guys in the front of the net. Like, what's the defenseman doing?
Somebody had an issue with the high sticking penalty?
No, not that one. The one before, a lot of people did. The Carolina, Florida game. The high stick. I guess my issue was, did he really get sticked in the face there, or did he just wave? But you can't just go and stick left without actually getting a guy's stick. Like, that's just careless use of your stick there. So I
think it was Delandria that took one in.
It was, yeah.
It was the stick lift without getting the stick, and it ended up being a chin lift with the stick. He was pretty lucky, frankly, that it was a hard enough shot to the chin. He was lucky that it didn't bleed. Mind you, it didn't matter because they scored in the first 2 minutes and they only needed 1 goal, and they do stay alive. Listen, the most interesting thing coming out of last night's game overall, Reem, was one of the great sporting event pictures of all time, where proud hockey dad and former Winnipeg Jet Ty Domi stood in between Mike Tyson and Ric Flair. What? How? Why? I saw this. I've been laughing the entire time. And by the way, Ric Flair, I'm not sure whether the Stars had him as a special guest to try to woo them back into the series, but I think Flair on video may have done the woo about 30 times after Pavelski scored in overtime. But there you go. What a photo.
This has got to be the best sports photo of all time. This has got to be up there, right? Everyone's looking at the camera, smiling. Mike Tyson with Ty Domi and Ric Flair. Absolutely incredible. And it's kind of cool seeing, the former Winnipeg Jets play, at least their kids play a big role in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, easy to find someone to cheer for, whether it's the Manitoba connections on Vegas, on Carolina. I know a lot of people in chat with Paul Stastny, Paul Maurice in Florida, but also Ty Domi's son Max on Dallas, and Keith Tkachuk's son Matthew, who's, Conn Smythe up there for Conn Smythe with Florida. So, but this picture, bring in whoever for Stanley Cup. I know a lot of casuals love the playoffs, the intensity, and this is 3 straight legends right here with Ric Flair, Ty Domi, and Mike Tyson. Absolutely incredible.
Patrolman Pete, move over. Ollie knocking out Sonny Liston. There's a new best sports photo in town. And you know what? Speaking of Max Domi, here's a quick why not question today for Not AutoCorp. Hit us up in the chat. What do you think about Max Domi as a potential free agent signing for the Winnipeg Jets if Mark Scheifele or Pierre-Luc Dubois are traded and maybe you don't get a center back in those deals? Interested to see what people think about that. We'll talk about it with Billeck coming up in just 1 second. But before we bring in Scott, 2 days from today, folks, Sunday afternoon, Modern Man Barbershop on Plessy's having their grand opening event. It's from noon to 5 p.m. You'll receive a haircut for $9 with proceeds going to the Prairie Wildlife Rehab Center. And the first 100 people get a free lunch from their neighbors at Crave Kitchen and Deli. Get Modern Men Barbershops now with 8 Winnipeg locations, but Sunday is the day, the grand opening event for the Plessy location. Get on down there. I went to the one on Pembina. Obviously, the cut was great. The people were great. Oh, man, and they had some great food there as well. So if you're not busy and you need a cut, no better place to do it than Modern Man Barbershops. Of course, Modern Man does it all. Haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more. Find out more and visit their Instagram at Modern Man Barbershops for more info. Well, this heat warning is probably going to go through next week. And a great reminder that maybe you go and make 2023 the year you take the plunge. Visit aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. Their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. With thousands of renos as their foundation, Aquatech can also upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech's ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options at aqua-tech.ca. One more day to get the incredible savings of the Manitoba Battery kick-off to summer sale. There's so much for all you campers, boaters, cabin goers, and golfers to take advantage of. They've extended it through until Saturday. Here you go. Deep cycle batteries start at $105. 6-volt golf cart batteries are $170. 8 volts are $180. And you'll get an additional refund back of $10 to $17 for your old batteries when they're returned, and they can be delivered within the perimeter at no extra cost. Compare with any of the big box stores, and not only will you not have to wait in line, but you'll also have to pay $30 to $50 more per battery at the big boys. Shop local and take advantage of the most convenient battery buying experience in Manitoba, and always get the best deal at Manitoba Battery. Sale goes until tomorrow, Saturday, May 27th. Go to manitobabattery.com for more info or pop down and see him at 1026 Logan Avenue. And Reem, I saw our pal James and the gang from Canadian Club Whiskey at the Bomber Taste of the Bombers event yesterday. They got some great new products, but I can tell you that there was a lot of people enjoying the Canadian Club and Ginger Ale at the event yesterday. And a lot of people looking forward to doing the same at the Rum Hut and more coming up. Right now, if you need a great quencher, you can get it at Manitoba Liquor Marts along with the entire Canadian Club products. But vendors, beer vendors, you don't necessarily need to get beer there. Check it out. CC and Ginger available in 473 milliliter cans at your local beer vendor as well. All right, let's kick things off with Scotty Billeck on a beautiful Friday afternoon. Scotty, what's up?
It's good. It's hot out, man. It's hot. I was at the Sea Bears practice this morning, and it's a warm one. So,
fill us in. What was the vibe around the Sea Bears? Are you going to the game tomorrow?
Hey, I'll be at the game tomorrow.
Me too. I'm fired up. I think this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think everybody's got. I mean, I think there's a lot of anticipation, right? Like, I think there's some of these guys that don't really know what is to expect, but you're going to be playing in a, National Hockey League arena in front of, I think the season ticket, we got a count today. I'm just looking at here. It's 6,600 plus for tomorrow.
Wow.
That was as of this morning. I think the record for the CEBL was 4404 before. So, I mean, they've just smashed the record, right? I mean, for most of these guys, I don't think some of them have played Commonwealth games. A couple of others played some other, not higher tier basketball, let's say, but, just like country competitions and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how, both Vancouver and the Sea Bears kind of take in, the biggest crowd in CBL history. And, the players, right? There's a few of them. Justice Allen's from here. Eileen is from here. Simon, their number one overall, not number one overall, but the first draft pick in their franchise history. Obviously, Chris, I'm going to be Chad
Postmus. Just call him Chatty the Batty or the Beast from River East.
Yeah, the Beast from River East, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of local flair on this team, and there's an excitement down there, right? I mean, the facilities these guys use, the Sport for Manitoba building is awesome, and so like it feels very professional. I've never covered an NBA game, but the fact that they're going to be playing in, essentially an NHL rink where they've hosted NBA games here before, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool, and to see most of the lower bowl, potentially the whole lower bowl, sold out for a first basketball game here. Like, I'd imagine that's gonna be a pretty cool experience, and obviously we'll find out tomorrow. But everybody's excited. I mean, this whole team is obviously they're an expansion team, and so that's one of the in terms of how they're going to actually do over the course of the season, we'll see. But it looks like a pretty cool. They got a great setup, and everybody's kind of pulling in the one direction there, and I think everybody's just excited and anticipating a pretty cool moment tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember. I think that first Thunder game in the old Winnipeg Arena might have had 11,000 people at it, and unfortunately, like, the team did really well, but the league was a disaster. And I mean, teams, it was the WBL, and by the time that the season ended, 4 of the teams had folded, and the Thunder, who were like 5th out of 6 teams, all of a sudden are playing in a final best of 5 series with all games in Winnipeg just because people would show up. That being said, there is a growing and great basketball community already here right now, and I think it's long overdue that Winnipeg got into the CBL. I know Mike Morreale had been working on it. David Asper made it happen, and it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow, so we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk Bombers, but I don't really know if there's a whole lot to talk about right now, Scott. I mean, what's the punting situation? I saw a bunch of the guys last night at that event at IG Field, and I mean, they're looking forward to getting out, playing a little bit on the weekend. But put it this way, the consensus from just about every guy I talked to was it's been a long training camp, and they're really looking forward to getting out there with some live bullets.
Well, that's the thing. You talked to Mike O'Shea, and I've been down there a few times last week and once over the weekend, and he's like, basically, I just want to play games, right? Like, we can only do so much evaluation playing against the same guys, and Mike O'Shea made a great point, is the vets on this team, the pros, like, they'll look at the guy in front of them and the guy behind them, what they do in a drill, and then go out and make the adjustment and beat them, right? And so it's different when you're playing a completely different team with a different group of guys that are also trying to make their respective teams and that sort of thing. And so, like, that's one part of it for sure. And the other part of it is a lot of these decisions are locked up, right? I mean, this team came into this training camp with very few question marks on who was going to do what. You mentioned the punter situation. That's one of them, and obviously they got to figure that out, whether it's going to be Mark Leggio, the incumbent, or some of the other guys, the Australian guy, incredible story. I did a story on him last week, and here's a guy who was playing Aussie rules football not long ago. Decided to give that up to go to a American football kicking camp in hosted by a former Green Bay Packers punter who was doing it over. It's called Pro Kick Australia. So he goes there, and the guy's like, "Oh, you should go and join, American college." So he ends up going to University of California, Berkeley. Stars there as their punter, and then stars as much as you can as a punter, I guess, right? But it's an interesting story. Now he's in the CFL training camp, right? And potentially could make the team. Now, interesting thing about that punting situation is here's an Australian who can kick the ball different ways, and that's the thing. You can do the end over end, which you don't really do too much in American and you don't do it in CFL football very often. But here's a guy who's kind of honed his craft on the spiral, kicking the spiral. It's an interesting camp because there's just not a lot really going on in terms of battling for positions.
Like, honestly, I was on with Dusty this morning. Yeah. And I'm like, listen, there's no big stories. I mean, it's time to get going. However, if you're looking for something interesting, check the punters. I mean, Mark Leggio, I would imagine like Leggio needs to win that job to be on the roster.
Lose, I think, right? Yeah, exactly. And he does. Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, right? If Mark Leggio doesn't win that job, maybe he plays practice roster, maybe another team picks him up, but I don't think he's here, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, ideally, this team was lucky for so long to have Justin Medlock, who could do both, and they didn't really have any issues with that. And Leggio had been doing both for the last couple of seasons as well, but couldn't really, the field goals were the problem, right? I mean, he missed one that would have put this team 10-0 last year, And obviously, I mean, we all know what happened later. Well, we would have that punt, that kick was going wide. It didn't matter what anybody says. He watched that thing go off his foot. That was going wide. But regardless, they brought in Sergio Castillo, and they've kind of shored up that on that front. But Mark Leahy was very good at punting. I mean, Derek Taylor, the voice of the Bombers on CJOB, has talked a little bit about how good Mark Leahy was at punting. I think he was maybe. And he has all those wacky stats in football that I don't completely follow. But they all point to Mark Leahy being a better than serviceable punter. So I believe it is his job to lose, but they've brought in some competition for him, right? And I think, the other one I thought is the Navy SEAL. The Navy SEAL, forget his name offhand right now, but that's a cool story too. Here's a guy who wanted to play college football, and so he leaves the SEALs after getting all that training and going through all that hell that you go through to become a Navy SEAL. And they've played him now at linebacker. They had him at fullback at one point. He's a long snapper. He'll likely be the long snapper on this team, but this guy's built like a tank, right? Like he is huge. And so it's gonna be interesting to see kind of how they use him, assuming he makes the
most
team.
versatile long snapper around. If you can do all that.
Here's a guy that's never going to quit, right? Like this guy will never quit, no matter what happens, right? Breaks his leg. Like
this is nothing.
Like these guys have going. Yeah, this is nothing for this guy, right? So, it's been an interesting camp, but like the stories have been. There's just not those challenges, right, that they've had in years past, or the competition that they've, let's say, had in years past. At least in my opinion, but. But there's been some cool stories. Guys trying to reignite their careers. Some guys who played in the XFL. I mean, the COVID, right? You've had some guys that have come through that and maybe didn't play football for a year and are now trying to get back into it. And so, there's some interesting stories like there is all the time in the CFL training camps. But in terms of just pure competition, it's pretty set, and I think that's exciting for Bomber fans because. You've seen how good this team has been since 2019, right? And part of that to me has been continuity, right? Throughout, whether it's been on the defensive line or the offensive line at quarterback, the receivers have always been good. They have probably the best receiving core in the CFL right now. I don't think it's close. So there's a lot of that stuff. And so there's an excitement, I think, about that there should be for fans that this team, again, is going to be very good and contending again for another Grey Cup.
No doubt about it. We'll have more on the Bombers next week as we get closer to the preseason opener at home. And then, of course, the home opener the following weekend as the 18-game schedule gets going in earnest. Scott Billeck from the Suns with us. Scott, I know you've tweeted about this a few times. So what is your perspective on this? Like, we've talked about it a little bit and people have had. So how should we feel about Paul Maurice going on this magical run to the Stanley Cup final? And is there anything does it change at all or maybe the people's perspective on his run here in Winnipeg and how it ended?
Yeah, so I got your chat up here because I'm interested to kind of see how people react to whatever I say on this. Not that it's not that I don't care. I think first of all, the people that are upset about Paul Maurice leaving, and I understand it. I've been thinking about this for a few days. I've been trying to write something on. I don't really know exactly kind of how to tackle it because I can understand why a fan would be upset about what happened. Because here's a head coach who, and we don't have to really sugarcoat, he walked out on the team. He quit on the team midway through a season, takes a half a season off to rest and recover and do all the other things you would do after having an 8.5-year run in a city, or 8-year run at least, in a city. And then, at the end of last summer, takes on the job of the Florida Panthers head coach. And, so I think there was probably some upset people then, but then to see kind of how this team, and let's not pretend that this Florida team was great all season, right? They backdoored it into the playoffs. They were a goal away. They were a Pittsburgh, I think, win away, or I forget. Somebody's been doing the calculation here, but it's that last game of the year where
Buddy
Pittsburgh
Robinson,
in. Yeah, that's
Buddy
it.
Robinson scored for the Blackhawks in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, to end Pittsburgh, and then
Pittsburgh would have been in.
Right, exactly. And we wouldn't be talking about this at all, right? So that's how thin the margin was for Florida to get into the playoffs. But you can't look past the fact that they took, first of all, they came from 3-1 down against the Bruins to beat them in 7 games. Like that's incredible in and of itself. If they would have lost there, you would have said 8th place team took off. They beat the historic Boston Bruins, right? The historic team that won 64 games, most in NHL history in the regular season, all that. The historic run, they knocked them
I
off.
always talk about that. I mean, if we want to talk about the craziness of how they got in, let's not forget that with 15 seconds left in Game 5 and a face-off in the Boston end, somehow the Panthers and Montour, who's been so good this playoffs, misplays the puck, and Brad Marchand has a clear-cut breakaway with 5 seconds left, and Bob sticks out his leg. If that puck goes in, they're out. Boston moves on in 5, and again, we're talking about it. I mean, there has been some miraculous things. That being said, they are making the most of it. Yeah.
And there always is. There always is along a playoff run. Right? There's always something that happens that leads you to winning. Like you go back to Philadelphia, 12 years, 13 years ago. They were up 3-0 in the series, and they ended up blowing it. They're the 4th team ever to do it. Things happen, right? And so, but I think they're, you look at how they beat Toronto. The confidence that they took from that Bruins win, they've ridden that the whole way. They've had Bob obviously playing out of his mind. Matthew Tkachuk's been unreal. But I think people haven't given this team kind of a lot of credit for what they've done, and that's part of it. I think Paul Maurice has had to go into that dressing room and really make sure these guys don't lose their heads, right? Like I think also that this team has a lot of players that are trying to prove themselves. You look at this roster up and down. They're players that, Brian Montour, you talked about him. He bounced around the league quite a bit, right? Matthew Tkachuk had to live up to a lot of expectation there based on how that trade went last summer, and he's been unbelievable. Potentially, depending how the final goes, could be your Conn Smythe winner if it's not Bob or whoever. But I'm struggling to find. It wouldn't matter to me either way whether I'm upset at Paul Maurice or not. But I can understand why fans are upset about it. But at the end of the day, it's moved on, it's over, and he went over and took over a team. And to me, I think it's a bit of a slap in the face for the Jets more than anything, because you look at the way that he's taken this Florida team, and everybody on that team is pushing in the same direction. And he has the year of all of those guys. And maybe we can say that 8 years, sometimes you lose a team in another way. And I'm not going to sit here and suggest that Paul Maurice said, he owns his fair share, 100% his fair share of how this room kind of got away from him and the rest of the team. And maybe, there was just too much of him. But I think, coaches, when they move on to a next job, oftentimes they learn from their past mistakes or whatever it is. They just have a different group of players and that sort of thing. And Paul Maurice is stepped up and led a team back to the Stanley Cup final the first time in 21 years for him. Like, I think it's a cool story. At the end of the day, like, this is a cool story. And this is one of the things I wrote in my newsletter this week. Like, I don't care if they win or lose, but the story here couldn't be like, you wouldn't find this in Hollywood or anything. It's a really cool story. See a head coach who basically, he threw his hands up and gave up on the team 17 months ago. And then has gone on to coach another team to the Stanley Cup final. The fact that he walked out of Winnipeg and into the Stanley Cup final, you don't see that very often. That's a cool story.
Do you think that, I'll be honest, and I don't know whether we need to relitigate, because God knows we spend a lot of time talking about this, but do you actually think he just 100% left on his own doing? Put it this way. I think it was obvious that it had gone to where something had to happen. I'm not sure whether they were just sort of making it, expressing a firing differently. I'm pretty sure he got paid. Let's face it, a lot of other people, if you just say, you know what, I'm not working anymore, that's a breach of contract. You don't get paid. So like the truth is somewhere in the middle in all of that. But I'll tell you what, and I don't know about slapping the face to the Jets, but I'll tell you what, I think this has got to be a real eye-opener for particular members of that hockey team that were probably looking back thinking about what the opportunity that they had and the way things went with some real regret. Because the one thing you can say about this Florida Panthers team, and listen, Matthew Tkachuk's leading the way, but I mean, whether it's a Barkov, who's always been an incredible two-way player, this is not new under Paul Maurice, but the buy-in that they are playing and the way they're doing it right now, like Mike Kelly, who is one of my favorite guys that covers the game. He's not an opinionated dude. He looks at things from a pretty analytical perspective. I just retweeted this out. If you're listening to this right now, go to my Twitter at Hustlerama. You can see the video from Mike. But he said, this was the tweet. He said, Sergei Bobrovsky is the biggest reason the Panthers are one win away from the Stanley Cup final, but he's not the only reason. Give Paul Maurice credit for recognizing in July what his team had to become to have success in April, May, and June. And I remember, at times, we said, oh, we've got all these really talented players. Why are they dumping it in so much and all about it? You know why? Because you need to get proficient in winning those puck battles. Because at this point of the time of the year, when you're playing against other great determined teams with not a lot of space and every inch is competed for the way it is, if you can't compete at that level and if you can't win those battles, you're not going to win. And the Panthers went from a team that never did that last year, and there were obviously some growing pains. And listen, they almost missed the playoffs. I'm not going to say that this was a Picasso all year long.
Right.
But Mike's point, and he uses some great videos showing the differences from last year, their tendencies to this year. Maurice worked all year long to try to teach a team that had already won a President's Trophy what they're going to need to do to win the Stanley Cup. And I'm not sure how long ago, it was towards the end of the season, probably in the last 15 games, and there were some ups and downs, but there wasn't a lot of consistency from Florida. Mm-hmm. And you remember that game where he absolutely lost it. I mean, it was a 5-star Maurice rang out in Toronto. And since that point, they have been pretty darn close to playing the blueprint of this. And that's why Jack Han wrote that going into the playoffs, this Florida team is a real stylistic challenge for the Boston Bruins. And the Boston Bruins still win that series, and Marchand just puts that one shot in. Yeah. But all of that, I mean, there's a lot of things that, need to conspire together to get to a team to this point. But the one thing that I think you have to tip your hat to Maurice and, frankly, the Panthers for acknowledging it and buying in is that they are all pulling on the rope the same way. There's no players that are sort of thinking, I'd rather do it my way. And we're seeing what's happening right now, Well,
this is the thing, right? You just compare and contrast it to what you saw in the playoffs from the Jets. And I don't know how anybody with a sound mind would sit there and look and say, hey, the Jets aren't far off from that. It's like, no, I mean, the Jets are miles from that.
If you watch the first 4 periods of the playoffs, you would think that.
Maybe, sure, yeah. But then you watch Game 5 and you're like, I don't think Florida's ever had a Game 5 in this series, right? I mean, or in this playoffs. I mean, you can say all you want that, in some games they got outplayed and the analytics or whatever. Carolina is a high shot volume team, and that's why they've always been. But you look back at Florida the whole season, one of the things that a lot of people said about Florida this season was that they were really, really good analytically, offensively, but it just wasn't, coming out onto the ice, right? I mean, the eye test wasn't matching the numbers. They weren't scoring the goals. They weren't,
They were like the Flames. They'd outshoot a team by 15 and lose.
Right. And so now, but you're starting to see it now, right, where this team is, and like, you have to give this team credit. They've knocked off the 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference, and they've done the last 2 with ease. Right. And I'm not going to say, like, I agree with Rod Brindamore. That was a close series, right? That wasn't a sweep in the traditional sense of, a sweep. Like, it wasn't like, the brooms and it was real easy and that sort of thing. That was a tough series that they came out on the right side 4 times in a row. But I think it's absurd to me not to give Paul Maurice some credit. And I've had to come around to this too, because and Kenny's coming on. He'll know, because he's probably going to smile when I say this. But he's smiling in the green room right now. But I was convinced at the end of Paul Maurice's reign that he just he couldn't really do it anymore, right? Like, I mean, he couldn't get this Jets team over the hump. And there was a lot of things that went into that or whatever, right? But I think the way, and I've thought about this, you know, at least a lot over the last few days, and the way that Paul Maurice could become, you know, he could get you to want to run through a brick wall for him, right? And that's exactly where he has the Florida Panthers right now. And there's no better place in the playoffs to be than to want to play and want to win for your head coach and want to play his way, because you know that it's a win. You've seen the reinforcement. You've won. You've beaten the Bruins. You've beaten the Maple Leafs, and now you've beaten the Hurricanes. Like, even if Vegas goes through here, and you know, there's a great argument that Vegas can win the series. Are the Florida Panthers not the favorites going into this series? Like, it's a weird thing to say, but the way that they have been playing and the way that they have been able to take care of some of the best teams in the NHL, like, they're built to play those teams, right? The strong forecheck, the Matthew Tkachuk that pisses you off on every play.
So is Vegas. That's why it'll be such a great series, assuming that Vegas does get through. I mean, to answer. Okay, go ahead. I was just going to say, to answer your question, it's going to be, I've been looking at some advanced lines ahead of last night's game. Yeah. And Vegas was the favorite, but it's slight. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, a large gap between the two. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, I think, you know, I think we can assume at this point and, you know, 4 teams have done this, right? So, you know, coming back from 3-0 down, maybe Dallas can do it. Who knows? But right now we got to assume it's Vegas, because that's just kind of the way that history has always played out in these situations. But I think it's a great series, right? And I think they've been calling it the tax-free Stanley Cup Series, or the tax-free bowl, or whatever they're calling it. I think that's all whatever. I mean, you know, it doesn't happen all the time that you see, you know, the tax-free states, and I get it. You can look at Tampa in the last couple of years, and Dallas was in the final and all that, or whatever.
It's certainly not hurting those organizations. I will tell you that.
But it's so much more than just like tax-free and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think, you know, Florida has 100% deserved where they're at right now to get to where they're at. They've played well. They've had great goaltending. I mean, people complaining, well, Bob stole them games. Well, yeah, that's the playoffs, right? Like, I mean, you know, the goalies steal games because, I mean, that's just the way it goes. Look at Marc-Andre Fleury on the way, you know, to the Western Conference Final when the Jets played him. Marc-Andre Fleury put up a .950. And so he didn't in the Stanley Cup Final against Washington. So Washington won that
and
series.
They lost,
but I find it so. I think people just want to be upset. There's not everybody. I think there's a certain group of fans from Winnipeg that just are not happy to see Paul Maurice succeed, and it's just a weird thing to me, right? Like, and I just like it's something I don't understand. And you know, I have no horse. I don't care if Paul Maurice wins or loses the Stanley Cup Final. The story is incredible, though. If he just goes from you know, we can argue or debate about walking out or whatever.
Hey,
but
there were guys that wanted him fired this year.
I know.
And who knows if they don't, if Pittsburgh wins that game, who knows what the offseason is like. Anyways, we got another series to find out. I'll see you at the Hoops tomorrow. Have a great weekend, Scott.
Yeah, have a good one.
There's Scott Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun. Kenny Wiebe on deck right now, and I know Ken's probably hit the grill quite a bit already. Golf course and grilling, the off season for Wiebe's world. If you're thinking about grilling on the weekend, you might want to head down to Vita Health Fresh Market and check out their delicious Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks. Not to mention great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries. And when you order online, you can now choose same-day local delivery at myvita.ca. Just place your order by 11 a.m. and you'll get your order that same day. Orders placed after 11 will be delivered the next day. Vita Health Fresh Market, 7 locations in Winnipeg, including the newest store in Linden Ridge. And you can always shop online as well at myvita.ca. If you need a fence or overhead door work and frankly you don't want to build it or want to talk to the experts, you need to get to Wallace & Wallace, Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialist, doing it for residential and commercial customers since 1946. Vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fence options. And if you need to replace your garage door, they've got Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. Give them a call at 452-2700 to set up an appointment for a free estimate, or visit them at wallacefences.com, or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenaston. To find out more, how's the closet looking, fellas? Is the wardrobe's looking good for spring and summer? If you need to upgrade it, get ready for wedding season, you need to head down to F Apparel. Up your menswear game heading into spring and summer with F Apparel. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. A 15% discount for wedding parties if you and the fellas need to get looking good for the big day together. And 2023 high school grads, free custom shirt and tie from F Apparel with the purchase of a new suit for high school grads this year. 190 Smith Street downtown is where F Apparel's at. You can make an appointment or check them out online at EPHapparel.com. And hey, with the heat warning in effect, I don't know if there's ever been a better time in 2023 to head down to Nick and Nicky DQ and grab some of those delicious ice cream treats and on to the new summer blizzard flavors that have just dropped. Do it at any of their 4 locations: DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. And if you do need a blizzard or ice cream cake for your next event, get it custom made with whatever you want on it by hitting them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. All right. Well, it looks like he's at home base right now. I didn't know whether we'd be catching him on the Manitoba Golf Tour or potentially the Minnesota Golf Tour on the way to see the Jays in the Twin Cities on the weekend. But Sportsnet's Ken Wiebe joins us for a little Friday frolic. What is up, Weber? How are you?
Good afternoon, Huss. Great to be with you. Yes, I do like to take the jaunt down to Minneapolis to see the Blue Jays. Didn't quite line up with the timing this year, but it has nothing to do with their, 2 of their last 11
slump
in the AL East either. Not a fair weather when it comes to the Blue Jays, but I was waiting to see what was shaking with the rest of the playoffs here. And as you know, I've been covering the Eastern Conference Final, albeit remotely from the headquarters here. So yeah, no, it's an interesting time. The tour, have not got into the Jeff Hamilton garage sale mode yet, but I was enjoying the earlier in the week discussions that you guys had. I'm here.
I wonder
for
if he's going on the waters tonight. Friday is apparently the new night now. For that.
I know that for folks who didn't hear, definitely a great content opportunity for the both of you, and I'm here for it. I'm here to say that I'm here for it. As for things that are happening, yeah, it's been an interesting week for sure on the hockey front. Not a whole lot shaking on the regular homebound front. I did post a column just now, Huss, that you wouldn't have seen yet on the maybe the Jets and Canes could find themselves as trade partners here. Just having covered that series, there were several times I couldn't help but wonder. I know I mentioned kind of in passing maybe Scheifele and Brind'Amour as a not necessarily the natural mix, but after watching how they struggled offensively, Huss, I still do wonder if Mark Scheifele might make sense for them. We know that they're a team that has a lot of pending UFAs in 2024, much like the Jets are. We know they're not afraid either to run with a goalie or a goalie tandem going into the final year of unrestricted free agency, like we just saw here with Antti Ranta and Freddie Anderson. So to me, that naturally would put Connor Hellebuck potentially on the radar if the Jets are in a position where they have to move him. I just wonder, there's going to be other teams, and we've talked about them a lot, Huss, and, as I looked into their roster a little bit, I couldn't help but notice someone like Marty Necas, who had a tough playoff, just 1 assist in his last 5 games. This is a 24-year-old who is a natural center, used mostly on the wing with the Hurricanes. We know they're strong down the middle with Aho and Stahl and Kotkaniemi and company, but I have to wonder if, I'm not saying they're going to panic and make a move with Necas. What I am saying is they're a team that has set a certain limit in terms of what they're willing to pay their players. Necas led their team in scoring this year on a 2-year bridge deal that paid him $3 million. So naturally, I wonder if he might be someone who gets squeezed out eventually. I think they're going to commit to him, Huss, but if you're the Jets, that is a 24-year-old and around the same age bracket as Pierre-Luc Dubois, who would be able to fill one of those top 2 center positions if they need to be filled.
Is he a UFA at the end of his deal?
RFA right now, just so he's still just in a restricted situation. I just wonder about the Aho is a UFA in 2024, Huss. So to me, Aho and Pesce, those are guys that are going to probably re-sign. So where does that leave someone like Necas?
It's funny you bring that up because Natchez was a guy that we had talked about last summer when we were talking about potential things. And I think this sort of gets to, unfortunately, the situation that the Winnipeg Jets are finding themselves in. The inactivity or lack of action over the last couple of years has put them into a situation where they're in a lot of ways probably being forced to make some of these moves. And if you had your eye on Natchez last year, you're probably going to be, you might have a little bit more success grabbing a guy coming off a 40-point season than after being the leading scorer at 24 years old.
No, for sure. But I mean, Huss, the other thing too, what we've been talking about Carolina, they haven't been able to score. And Natchez was one of those guys who was their leading scorer and then didn't score in the playoffs. That's not to say that he didn't have chances, and he obviously did. And, he missed Svechnikov, and, that's obvious. But I'm not saying they should panic and move him. What I am saying is that sometimes teams that are in a rush to win the championship and are in their win now window, like the Hurricanes are, may consider, more of a battle-tested stock like Scheifele, who is, just coming off a 42-goal season. As great as Natchez was, 42 goals for Scheifele, 28 for Natchez. Yeah, I understand one guy's 30 years old, 31 years old, and the other is 24 and has played in the playoffs in each of the last 4 years and is just starting to figure it out. What I am saying is that I am curious also, too. I'm also as curious about Hellebuyck for them as I am about Scheifele. Obviously, they're looking for some cost security, Huss, especially at a time where they may be looking at extending someone like Aho. They just rolled this year with Freddie at 4.5 and Ronta at 2.0. Kochetkov, obviously he was on his ELC, but he's going to $2 million next year. He's the only goalie in this organization under contract. I don't think, they love him and he's a great prospect. But if you're trying to win and you were just the second best team in the NHL and came 8 wins short of your ultimate goal, I'm not certain that Kochetkov is the guy they're ready to roll with for 50 starts next year. Enter Connor Hellebuyck, one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League. And Huss, we've talked about this for years. How good do you think Hellebuyck might be on a team that is so as stingy as a team like the Carolina Hurricanes compared to the volume and quality he has been facing during his 8 seasons as the Jets starter? I mean, to me, if you're Don Waddell, you'd have to be giving that a serious look and thinking, hey, we can provide this guy the type of stability. And Huss, I mean, can they sign him? Would they be willing? We know it's unlikely they'd be willing to go to 9 or 10 in the next deal for Hellebuyck to keep him around. But if they put a banner up, I'm pretty sure they'd be all in on a 1 year. I wouldn't even call that a rental. That's a 1 year deal with one of the best goalies in the league, with one of the stingiest defensive teams as it is. That doesn't solve their goal scoring problem, but it certainly would help. And this is not to suggest the Hurricanes goaltending let them down. It did not. But no matter how you argue it, the Hurricanes had the second best goalie in the series. And sometimes that's not fair, Huss. It's happened to Hellebuyck himself. But the best goalie in the series was pretty clearly at the other end of the ice. So I'm not saying they're looking to upgrade the position, but if you're in win now mode, and Huss, the crazy thing about Carolina, 12 consecutive losses in the Eastern Conference Final, including 4 this year and 4 in 2019 with much of the same core. That just reinforces how hard it is to win. The Hurricanes were the second best team in the NHL this year. They got halfway to their goal, Huss, and it's not long ago you and I were talking about this when it came to the Jets. The Jets got 9 wins out of the 16 required. They had a pretty darn good team, and they haven't sniffed it since. Carolina's been back a second time and still didn't sniff it, and they had a great team, right? So, I mean, it's now what happens next? I mean, now does Don Waddell have some regret for not adding another forward outside of Jesse Puljujarvi at the deadline? I mean, I would think he might, and that's why I think Scheifele could still be in the mix there, even though it's not a natural fit. He doesn't play their style the same way that you would expect them to in terms of the tenaciousness. But Scheifele said this year, Huss, he wants to be coached. I can't imagine a guy who would be digging in on the coaching side more than Rod Brind'Amour, a guy who knows a thing or two about two-way play.
I mean, I hate to be the cynic here, but I mean, I know Scheifele said that he wanted to be coached, and for about half the year, he sort of bought into that. And then in the second half of the season, he seemed to be pretty much directly at odds with a guy that was doing many of the things and trying to preach many of the things that we're seeing the successful teams do right now that are still playing in the playoffs.
No, Hudson, that's totally fair. But what I would say is different between this current season and next season is that said player is looking to be cashing in on his next deal. And one of the things that, could be required is some of that might have to shine up the car, when it comes to the next sale of the car, if you will. So he certainly took care of the goal scoring portion. And Huss, there's always a coach or a GM that thinks that they can be the ones who turn this player into the next version or the better version of them, of that player, right? So for Scheifele, he's got no problem. He's an elite offensive talent. Does he need to improve his defensive game? Of course. It's been that way for years. But this is a guy whose reputation took a bit of a hit the last couple of years in terms of that defensive portion. And I would think that the Hurricanes are a team that might not be afraid of the $6 million bet. Like, I'm not saying it's the same deal. Obviously, Vegas moved Pacioretty for cap reasons, but they made a gamble on a guy who was going into an expiring deal. Obviously, he got hurt twice, and it didn't pay off for them. And yes, of course, Vegas made it worth their while, and this is not the same scenario, but I don't think they'd be scared. I mean, Max Pacioretty's not exactly known as a two-way ferocious force, either on the back check or the forecheck. So they brought him in for goal scoring. So I could see them looking at Scheifele as a goal scoring possibility. And you talked about this with Hammer earlier in the week. For Scheifele, Carolina's perfect. They've got their leadership structure well in place. Mark just needs to show up and play hockey. And that to me might
and buy in.
Right, for sure. The buy-in is the most important part. But here's the other part of that. If the buy-in's not there, Mark's only hurting himself because he's going to hurt his value going into the most important summer of his career, right?
Let me just quickly on that, because we've been talking about what's available via unrestricted free agency this summer, and it's light. When you look at the top 50 free agents, I mean, I'm looking at if the Jets trade these centers for futures, I mean, who would be guys that would be able to be there? Or we've been talking about Max Domi maybe. I mean, there's no players of a Scheifele caliber right now that are there. But then you look ahead to the following summer and the Ahos of the world. It seems like it's a very different story for the summer of 2024. And just as you said that, Ken, I got thinking. For players like Scheifele especially, but even Pierre-Luc Dubois as well, does it make sense for them to try, if they are being traded, for the Winnipeg Jets to try and engage with teams that will extend them now, so that they are not in first of all, one more season where, things can go up and down, but basically secure the bag now and have that cost certainty going forward, as opposed to going into it, a UFA market for Scheifele on the wrong side of 30 with far more competition for those dollars than, for instance, would be right now if he was a free agent this summer.
Yeah, I mean, there's competition today, Huss, for sure. But what if Carolina signs Aho on July 1st, right? I mean, as soon as July 1st comes, we're going to have clarity with Matthews and Marner and some of these other guys too. Not Marner in the future extension sense because he has the extra year, some of those other guys. Would it make sense for the team? Of course, Huss. Does it make sense for the player? And now Scheifele's in a different situation than Dubois, 31 versus 24, turning 25 for sure. But these players, Huss, the other piece of uncertainty for the player, how much is the cap going up? It's only $1 million this year, but in year 2 or 3 of that extension that you'd be considering to sign, is the cap up $7 million or is it up $12 million? Right? I mean, that's a big difference. So I wonder if there's going to be more players looking to roll the dice rather than secure the bag. Now, Scheifele doesn't maybe fit in that category because of his age, but some of the younger players, and even a guy like Aho is a great example, Huss. I mean, people still talk, why did the Canadians do that? Well, that offer sheet never made sense at all. Well, it sure makes sense in one regard, because Carolina is going to have to make a decision on a guy who's in his prime years, right? The 5-year term was the advantage because now Aho could come to market earlier than if it would have been an 8-year deal, right? So that didn't help the Canadians immediately, but it might help the rest of the league if the Hurricanes can't secure his services. Now, how that relates to Scheifele and Dubois, we don't know, but there are probably a couple players, Huss, that wouldn't mind just taking that 1-year deal and riding it out and then seeing what the good old hockey-related revenue looks like in the 2024 summer when teams may have a little bit more money to spend. Now, having said that, is there risk involved in that? Of course there is. There's also risk involved, and Scheifele knows this better than anyone. There's also risk involved in committing early because sometimes you feel that your value wasn't exactly maximized. So, how that pertains to the Jets players, I'm not certain. And, sticking on that front, what does it mean for Hellebuyck? And, does Hellebuyck want to sign an extension with his team, Huss? Or would Connor Hellebuyck be just fine rolling into Carolina or somewhere like that, having a great year, potentially having another Vezina-like season, maybe tossing a Stanley Cup on the resume to even bolster his stock for the summer of 2024? I mean, if you're a player, that's got to have some appeal also. Now, of course, there's risk involved in that, Huss, but to me, that's a ready-made situation. And don't get me wrong, I just mentioned Carolina as a possibility because I just covered their series. There are going to be other teams that have already been brought to the forefront and others who could be lurking in the weeds that are thinking Connor Hellebuyck immediately makes them a Stanley Cup contender or front runner. And those are the teams we'd expect to hear in these 5 weeks leading up to the NHL draft.
Let's focus on the centers for a minute. And I guess, Connor Hellebuyck, if he is traded.
It's still an if, Huss, but it has something that we have to acknowledge as a real possibility.
Well, absolutely. And I think that the reason why I bring that up is that if you're trading two centers, but you're also trading a Vezina winning goaltender, you could potentially fill one hole what you get for one position and vice versa on the others. But focusing on the centers, Ken, as we speak right now with what you're hearing, what do you think the ask is right now? What are the Winnipeg Jets looking to go 1-for-1 and try and keep this team where it's at? Or is there a recognition that maybe younger players under team control, first and foremost, that can grow into players that'll be Winnipeg Jets longer than any sort of term that would be on a more established player coming back in a deal?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I understand what I would expect them to be doing, Huss, and that would be what you've been mentioning for the last few weeks here, but it depends what's being offered and what's available, and that's the thing that we won't know until all the teams are out. Certainly there would be teams talking and discussing, and they've made their own boards and they've made their own teams that they want to attack or engage in conversation with. But until the thing is wrapped up and, one team's holding the cup and the other team's feeling nothing but disappointment, then where some of those teams are at in terms of what their future structure is. And until there's a real bidding war or until there's more teams interested, then the leverage is all on the side of the player, which is what we've been talking about from the beginning. And Connor Hellebuyck made it clear for himself that he fits in that same category, and same for Dubois and Scheifele to a degree. The difference being Dubois needs a contract for next season. But, it's impossible to know. What you need, Hassan, we've talked about this for weeks. You need a team that is in a similar, if you're the Jets and you're trying to avoid the rebuild, which we expect that to be the case for them, you need to find a team that's looking to change the mix in the same manner that you are. You have good players on both sides, but the mix hasn't been right so far. Maybe this player helping that part of the mix where you maybe are deficient can send someone where they have an excess of that particular player and send it your way, and maybe that will help you. What teams those are and how desperate those teams are, we won't know until probably the week of the draft. There will be rumblings, Huss, for sure. But until there's a real competition for those players' services, those other teams are, you talked about it perfectly with Jeff. It's a game of chicken and who's going to blink. And the problem for the Jets is that you're not only blinking on one person, you're blinking potentially on 3 and probably 4. And if all 4 are gone, there may be 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 that are wanting to be knocking on the door and saying, if that's the direction we're going, get me out of here immediately. And again, that's not to set off alarm bells, Huss, but the players made it pretty clear at the podium, especially the players we are discussing currently. They didn't have a lot of interest in a rebuild. So then what does the retool look like? And, the whole thing, the domino effect here, Huss, who's first and what does that mean for the other people, right? That's the other thing that we're not going to know for a while. When we look at the big decisions for the Jets, one of the earliest big decisions was, were the Jets going to sign Dustin Byfuglien or Andrew Ladd? They didn't wait till the end. They were negotiating with both people, and by the time one of them accepted, the other was moved. So This time it's a little bit different because there's probably multiple pieces being moved, but we kind of don't know which of those balls will get the race rolling here on the, let's use the marble race analogy for a Friday afternoon here. I'm not 100% certain. I know a lot of people have been suggesting it's got to be Dubois first, and that might be the case, but for me, the biggest decision is on Hellebuyck. Hellebuyck is the guy that has been the backbone. That's to take nothing away from what those two centers are. And of course, if the Jets lost both centers, they would need to get two centers back or sign Nemesnikov and bring another one back to take the other job. But also, what are the Jets going to do in terms of the roster construction, Huss? You were talking about this with Scotty. There's a big difference between what the Panthers roster looks like compared to what the Jets roster looks like. And to me, part of that is in roster construction. So I think the Jets would be looking to move some of those pieces anyway, no matter what happened and no matter who was a pending UFA in 2024, because right now the mix is not in a situation where you can so the Jets won 1 out of the possible 16 this year. I don't think saying that running it back is quite simply not an option, no matter how you cut it. So what pieces are you looking for? The teams still playing are a great example, right? Chandler Stevenson, Huss, was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights for a 5th round pick. He, at the time, was a 4th line center that occasionally played on the wing. Now, he has grown into a very valuable piece. Now, the Jet scouts, it's up to them to identify someone in a similar manner. Stevenson is a very fast skater. He is not afraid to get his nose dirty. He's a really good penalty killer, plays on the power play. These guys don't grow on trees, but there are players in other organizations who have not been given a big role that might be able to flourish if given the opportunity. That's not to say Chandler Stevenson or someone like him, earlier on in his career can fill the boots of Mark Scheifele. That's not to say that at all. But those are the kind of players you're going to have to try to find if you're the Winnipeg Jets, whether that's in free agency, whether that's in trades, whether that's in whatever means necessary kind of mode, Huss. I mean, that's sort of where things are at.
And just going back to what you said about what we heard from the players on Garbage Bag Day, and I'm going to remove Helly from this because to me, he's in a whole nother situation, frankly, another stratosphere for the consistency and what he's delivered this team. But you talk about the guys that were saying, well, we're not in for a rebuild. To be honest, I heard a bunch of guys that were frankly delusional about a lot of things. And the lack of accountability, like the fact that it was all about, we were upset at Rick Bowness because he went off after the game. I mean, like I've spent a lot of time, and I'm interested in your perspective on this. Like, how do you think that went over in Kevin Cheveldayoff's office? Because, as much as Rick came out later on and sort of, like he didn't back away from anything that he said. And I think anyone that watched that series and watched other series with the Winnipeg Jets would agree with everything that he said and certainly what happened this season. But, when guys are talking about, they're in for a rebuild, I mean, performances like that sometimes force teams to go in a different direction. I mean, what do you think that just the way that the season ended, having that happen again in the fashion that it did, and then, a bunch of guys that, were talking about how they didn't like the way their coach conducted themselves, other than maybe the way they conducted themselves with their backs against the wall, facing elimination in a playoff Game 5 against Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, Huss, I don't know. To me, I'm not bothered. I mean, it's not something that has just been keeping me up at night. Did I like it, or did I think it was, the mode that I would have thought?
No, but if you're the general manager that's put that team together, like
Huss, the thing for me,
some big decisions to be made.
I think Kevin probably took more stock into what was said in the meetings with the players and what they said publicly, quite frankly. To me, that sounded like a bunch of players that said, at the dinner the night before, we're going to show him or whatever. Basically, that's my interpretation. I don't know that to be true. To me, that sounded like, a team that they're pissed off about losing and decided to take a stand. Do I think they could have taken a better stand? Of course.
They were way more pissed off by what the coach said, it sounded like, than actually losing the way they did. We didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, Huss, having been in the room after Game 5, there were pissed off players, and I know that to be the case. And I don't think that they would have been any less pissed off because Rick Bowness went off after the game at the podium. I mean, they were already pissed off about losing. Their effort in the series was quite high outside of Game 5. So, I mean, Is it a recurring theme for this group? Something that we saw in St. Louis? Yes, it has happened with that core group before, and that is absolutely 100% true. Does it have any impact on what happens this off season or in the summer or in next season when it starts? I don't know. I mean, I think we're always looking for more clues, and to be honest, at the podium, those guys, I think they have very little interest in being at the podium 2 days after they've lost and are going home for the summer. And that's why podium, it used to be, let's just put it this way. When the exit interview days used to occur, when the interviews were happening in the room, I would say the conversations were probably way more casual, but add a little bit more substance to them. I think it's a terrible format for players to speak because generally it's very awkward having someone beside you, depending on who's sitting beside you. And, look no further than Pierre-Luc Dubois sitting with Cole Perfetti. Dubois gets drilled with 6 questions out of the gate, and then hello, Cole. Like, want to talk about your injury? Like, it's just not a great format.
Why do they do it that way?
It's just made
Some
for
teams don't.
Most teams do it this way now, Huss. It's just sort of made for TV. I don't know. It's in the
content.
content.
Is there any team that's with more cameras and more TV than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they weren't doing it? They had all their guys, and frankly, all their guys were wearing Leaf stuff too, which is one thing that you didn't see from any member of the Winnipeg Jet that day. Not that that's a big deal, but it was interesting to note the difference between the two clubs and the way that was handled, and frankly, what came out of the mouths of those two teams.
Well, Huss, there was still a lot for the Leafs. They want to roll it back. I mean, a lot of I didn't see a whole lot of pissed off about losing. I know they were, of course, but I mean, I didn't necessarily see a heck of a lot of accountability on that front either, in terms of how the players responded on some fronts. Yes, some of them did, obviously, but I mean, ultimately too, Huss, I mean, we're in the media. We want to hear, we want the quote, we want the sound bites. We want to hear, people say, be a little bit more honest and forthcoming. And would we love that? Of course we would. But at the same time, I think that what is said doesn't necessarily always lead to how the team is built or constructed in the off season. And, did I like what I heard? No, but I mean, it's just an interesting situation. And if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, do you have to be cognizant of what was said and how it was said? Of course you do. But they say actions are louder than words, and I'm sure he's far more concerned with the actions of his team. And that's kind of what I'm getting
half of that series.
Sorry, Huss,
Neither of them were very good, though.
I've been looking for the words, and you took them right out of my mouth. Maybe you said it a lot more concisely than I did in that situation, but it's just there need to be changes. So this is just the way it is. I mean, how those changes are made, that's going to determine what the course of history is for the Jets, right? I mean, trading Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic for Pierre-Luc Dubois, that was a signature moment for Kevin Cheveldayoff. Now, the first year we know didn't go well. The second year went pretty well personally, but not for the team. The third year, he was an excellent player, and it went well for the team until about January 17th. But it's still a valuable player. But we talked about this last summer. Once Laine signed the 3-year extension, it was, it was reliant on the Jets to either get a deal done or move him for a package that makes the Jets a good hockey team. Outside of that, it's now you're picking up the pieces with some other players and trying to recoup some of the other assets. So this is a signature summer for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets. And how they handle it is going to determine the course of action over the next, whatever it is, 3 to 5 years. And I think too, Huss, that this is something too that we've been talking about a lot for years. 2015, the Jets were not skilled enough to compete with the Anaheim Ducks, even though they had the lead in 3 of the 4 games and played very well and very hard against them. But they tilted a little bit too far to the right when it came to the skill level, and they lost some of that other stuff that made them a hard-working team, that made them a blue-collar team, a team that is reflective of the city, Huss. And that is what they sort of, I think, for me, need to get back to. They definitely have some pieces in the puzzle already, and some really good examples of that already on the roster. But they need to get back to that. But it's easy to say that. And now all of a sudden, what were we saying for those first 5 years of the Jets? Well, Brian Little's scoring 65 points. He's not a number 1 center. Well, Brian Little was a very capable player, Now, all of a sudden, the Jets are going to be looking at potentially not having Scheifele or Dubois. So unless you fill that hole, we're going to be back to the other part of the discussion, which is why the Jets don't have an 80-point player or a 42-goal scorer playing in the middle. Now, can Brad Lambert help with that in a couple of years? He's certainly going to help, no doubt. Can he play center at the NHL level? We have no idea. He's doing an excellent job at the Seattle Thunderbirds. He'll probably need to do an excellent job with the Manitoba Moose next year. And then we'll see what happens. But what's going to fill the gap? That's what is up. That's what Kevin Cheveldayoff is probably up late at night, most nights, trying to think about. And they're not the only team in this situation. It's like we talked about off the gate. The Carolina Hurricanes, they also might be losing their number one center. And the Calgary Flames, their number one center is also up in 2024. And so is the Toronto Maple Leafs number one center. So this is not just a Jets problem. This is a league-wide problem. And teams are going to have to either get creative or empty the bag, as you mentioned earlier. And in this situation, I'm not sure emptying the bag would help, though I'm not ruling it out as a possibility. But that's the other part. So how are you going to attract that talent if you are shipping? If you can't get it back in a trade, how are you going to get it in here? I mean, that goes back to the deadline. My number one target was Ivan Barbashev, who just so happens to be a point-a-game player in the playoffs. But if you're Ivan Barbashev, who can play center or a wing, and he's currently on the top line of the Vegas Golden Knights, the only way you're signing in Winnipeg is if Winnipeg offers the most money, right? So what's the number, and does that make the Jets appealing to someone like Barbashev? Even though he's not a traditional number one center, he's playing on the wing, he has played some center. So I don't know. Historically, the Jets haven't been a primary free agent focus. Matthew Perreault ended up being a great fit there, Huss, but that was a guy who was not qualified by his former team that ended up being an incredible value buy for the Jets.
Yeah, listen, I mean, and teams could only hope to have as good fortune as Vegas did with the heist of the century and Chandler Stevenson and what he's turned into. And I think a lot of credit goes to the way they've used him and the opportunity that he's been given as well. Just before we go, like, if the Jets are in a situation where through trades they've got a big hole at center in the top six, what do you think about Max Domi? And I say Domi just because, I mean, maybe there is a bit of a connection to Winnipeg. He was born here. His dad obviously loved his time here. I mean, he signed a one-year deal last year with a horrible team, ostensibly to be traded. This has happened. He's getting a chance to showcase himself a little later on, a little more now in the postseason. There will be, presumably, if that was the case, there would be an opportunity for a top six center spot for him. And he certainly does play with a lot more bite than maybe they've had in that position, from a guy like Scheifele, for instance. Does that make sense to you? And any idea on what that would mean, like what a contract for Domi would look like? Presumably now I'm thinking he's looking a little more long-term than the one-year deal he signed last year with the Hawks.
Yeah, for sure. And Domi is a guy who certainly, we know there's links to the Jets, not just because of Ty. We know that the year in 2013, the Jets looked at trading up to try to get him when Arizona drafted him. And that year the Jets got Josh Morrissey. So they're pretty happy that worked out. So we know there's been interest previously. With Domi, he's impressed me for sure with how he's played. Sometimes Hussick can be a little bit deceiving, and that's to take nothing away from any player in the National Hockey League. But sometimes on a bad team, it's easy to put up numbers. When you're put in offensive situations, because there's no pressure. Yeah. But having said that, Domi has done an excellent job with the Dallas Stars of being a very high-end contributor. And he would bring back some of that snarl the Jets are probably going to lose if Pierre-Luc Dubois moves on. So I do like it in that regard. The other thing about Domi, Huss, he's really, to me, unless I was not paying attention, he's worked on his skating. He's a much faster skater than I thought. He's definitely a gritty kind of person, goes to the hard areas. He's moved around in his career, so sometimes is that a red flag? I don't necessarily think it is, but I think that Max Domi's matured as a player over the years, and I think he would be someone that the Jets would look at. But it's not the same type of player. Like, I don't think you could expect Max Domi to be an 80-point player with the Jets, but if he's a 60-point player and gives you something else, maybe it's a possibility.
There's no 80-point players in free agency.
No, fair.
Even if they had a chance to
ones.
Get them. Like,
sure.
Here are the names. Just this is Frank's top 50 list. JT Compher, who's 28 from the Avs. They predict a contract in a 5.53 number, and he had 52 points playing for the Avalanche.
For sure.
There's Ryan O'Reilly, who's 32 looking at a 3.5.5. Ryan O'Reilly would look great. Not sure he'd be coming here. Jordan Staal, 34. Unlikely, a possibility. Eric Holla, 32. I mean, we're talking about these Olli Jokinen type deals, maybe, where you get a guy coming in for 2 years as other guys go. David Kampf, Evan Rodriguez, those guys are at least on the right side of 30 and probably wouldn't cost you as much. Nick Foligno, Bukestad, a banged-up Sean Monahan, who's incredibly only 28 years old. Like, with what he's been through, I thought he was like 33 or 34. And Teddy Bluger. I mean, there is just not much at the center position if you're looking to solve your problems through the UFA market this year.
No doubt, and that's why I think the trade that's Kevin Cheveldaev's going to have to make some, high-end trades. And does that mean packaging up some guys together to help yourself? I'm not sure, but there are always guys available. Financially, there's going to be teams that are looking to shed payroll. There are going to be teams that are going to need payroll to get to the floor. So the creativity is going to be required. Ryan O'Reilly would make sense as a culture carrier, Huss, but if you're Ryan O'Reilly, I mean, you're probably trying to win a championship. You've won one already, yes, but you're probably taking less money to go to a real higher-end contender if you're him. So we'll see how it goes, but he would be someone that I would think would be great in terms of trying to change the culture and being a great leader. I just think he's going to have some other options that he's probably going to be looking at first. But that's the beauty of this, Huss, the unpredictability factor. There's going to be an ownership change in Ottawa. What does that mean for their team? We'll see what happens there. We know that there's been some GM changes. There's going to be some coaching changes that get filled here, and those coaches may be asking the GM, in the old Bill Parcells terms, are going to be asking for a few different groceries at the store. So what does that mean? Like that's why we anticipate the week of the NHL draft to be such a fascinating time of the year, because as we know, one team is going to be happy in about 2 weeks' time, and the other 31 are going to be looking to try to get to the top of the mountain, and it's a copycat league, but there's not a lot of copying for A, the model that the Vegas Golden Knights have put together, or B, what the Florida Panthers have put together, because being the President's Trophy winner and then sneaking into the playoffs is not the formula either, nor is having your $10 million goalie lose his job to Spencer Knight and Alex Lyon on the road to becoming a potential Conn Smythe Trophy winner. But the one thing I have to say, Huss, to you, and I understand this is a huge topic, and I'm not disputing it because it's true. But what if the Jets had not beaten the Pittsburgh Penguins in January in their template game either, then Pittsburgh would have been in the playoffs that way. It wasn't just because they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. And I know that's not you just saying this. The Panthers came back from a 9-point deficit to make the playoffs. So I don't care who lost to whom. The Panthers got the job done down the stretch. I mean, the Jets...
It's less about what the Panthers did and what the Pittsburgh Penguins weren't able to do. I mean, it was a 3-horse race between... two teams were getting in from those three. The Islanders, the Panthers, and the Penguins. And in the last couple weeks of the year, the Panthers were playing catch-up, and they lost control of their own destiny. And, I mean, I'm not sure that there's a shocking and inexcusable loss by any team in the NHL than with your entire season on the line, having Buddy Robinson do you in the third period on home ice. And I love Buddy.
Former Moose.
Absolutely.
Moose,
Listen, it was pretty wild. But listen, there's no doubt that they were better down the stretch. And I'm not sure whether, you've been writing about it, whether there was more of a turning point, either at that time where Maurice completely lost his mind on the bench in Toronto, or a particular game on it. I mean, to me, the moment for me was the save by Bob at the end of Game 5 on Brad Marchand, which if he doesn't make that save, they're out and they lose 4-1, and everyone goes, oh yeah, well, it's good for them. They got a game. Just before we go, we've talked about this with a number of other people, but I'm interested in, seeing the success that Maurice is having. And I mean, he absolutely deserves a lot of credit. I mean, there's been a lot of other things that have conspired to put them in the spot, but coaching is part of it. But knowing what we know now, does that change at all, or should that change people's views of what happened here in Winnipeg on the way out for Pomo?
Not for me, Huss. I mean, I understand it's been a topic of debate and much discussion and consternation. And yeah, there are a lot of people screaming from the rooftops one way or the other. I mean, some people hate it, some people love it, some people could care less. Some people are bent out of joint about it.
But does it show us anything? Like
Well,
listen,
it's just
a long
apples
time.
and oranges. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
this is very simple for me. And at the end of Paul's tenure, he did not love hockey anymore. And part of that was by his own doing and by his own volition. There's no doubt about that. He was clearly burnt out. He took the 6 months off where he didn't think about hockey almost at all, didn't watch any hockey, got away from the game, got himself into a far better place, and then an opportunity presented itself for him, and he's done a great job with that opportunity. Paul Maurice had no trouble, getting the attention of the Winnipeg Jets from the time he was hired until about 2019. So we can't look at it as apples and apples until we get into year 8 of the Panthers' tenure. So the people that are all up in arms on one side or the other side of the fence.
That's a great point.
I just this is not the same discussion. I mean, Paul Maurice came in and did a very good job. He got the Jets to a place they had never been before. The fact that he did not get them over the top, that is something that is going to be one of his own personal regrets. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, you have to commend him for his ability to pick himself up off the mat and say, I need to learn from this situation. And he's got a different roster construction there, Huss. I think.
No, listen, we need to get into this.
No.
And listen, this isn't as much about Maurice. I guess when I look at this, what I'm thinking is I really wonder about a number of these players that have been core pieces that I think in some ways sort of stopped buying in or stopped reacting to what their coach was saying. And I guess that happens. But I mean, at that point, you've got to make one move or the other. You need to move out some players and make a significant move, or you need to make a coaching change. Neither of those things happened. In my opinion, they sort of wasted the next couple years. But if I'm one of those players in the dressing room that thinks back about those missed opportunities and sees the way the Florida Panthers are buying in and the way that they are doing what they are being coached to do, I couldn't help but have maybe a little bit more regret seeing what is possible if you do play that way, considering the talent that they had in that locker room.
Sure, Huss. I would also argue that the Jets' best season was when they had the most talent. And, after Dustin Byfuglien walked out the door and Brian Little had his career unfortunately ended, their roster was different. I mean, they changed their defense core entirely and never really got it back to that point, right? I mean, the Jets had a $10 million third pairing that year in Kulikov and Tyler Myers. I mean, when you have the horses, it's easy to look good as a coach.
2019, to me, this all is about 2019. I mean, I thought they had
Sure,
the horses
Huss,
in that. I mean,
they did.
Something went rotten in the second half of that season, and I'm sure Maurice did everything he could to try to get that in. But I mean, we basically saw a lot of what happened with Rick Bowness in the last 2 months of this season or so in the second half of that year, but they were so damn good. They were basically second overall at New Year's that, even with the slide that they had through the entire second half of the season, they barely missed winning the division and ended up tied with the St. Louis Blues in the first, and then playing them in the first round.
For sure, Hassan. Again, I'm not reminding you, but I'm reminding the Royal you. Dustin Byfuglien was hurt on December 27th, and Josh Morrissey missed the last 20 games of the regular season that year. So while I do still appreciate the Jets, had some major issues down the stretch that they needed to sort out and never got that done, they were playing without two of their best defensemen for at least a quarter of each of that time in that 40-game span, and that was something they couldn't get over. And once Byfuglien left, they never got over that point again. So did the coach create some of those problems? Absolutely. He gave some players a little bit too long of a leash. Right now, the Florida Panthers are being led by a great leader, Matthew Tkachuk, a guy who the Jets hated playing against. But right now, and I know this is something that bothers certain communities out there that don't believe in clutch players, Matthew Tkachuk would like to differ in terms of his opinion, and he just produced 2 overtime winners, one in the 4th overtime, one with 4.9 seconds left in regulation. And, oh, by the way, for good measure, he set up Sam Reinhart for the only goal in Game 3. So I would seem to think that the counter argument might be on display. And yes, it's a small sample size and it's one series, but the Jet and Huss, I
mean, he wasn't a 13-goal guy during the season. He's got back-to-back 40-goal seasons. He had 109 points.
Right.
And he's a 40-goal scorer that actually is raising his level of play in the postseason, and that's why they're playing for the Stanley Cup.
Right, Huss. But how did Tkachuk play last year against Edmonton, right? Again, you have to learn this as a player. Last year, he struggled against Edmonton. Evander Kane got in his head, and after he scored the winner, I think in Game 2, he didn't have a good series. I mean, but that's good on Tkachuk for getting back to his previous form where he was a clutch performer for the London Knights. So anyways, just to tie a bow on it, I think it's like you said before, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think the most important thing that gets lost here, and I know with what you were saying about regret, the players should have regret too, but is it an indictment of Paul Maurice walking away, or is it an indictment of the players for not buying in? I mean, that's the other part.
It's the latter.
Right.
Believe me, to me, this isn't about Maurice.
Right.
This is about how it got to that point. And the fact that, at a certain point, I think they needed to make some move one way or the other. And unfortunately, I think that inability to, whether it's to decide or to go ahead and make that bold move, kind of cost them a little bit of this window that we've talked about.
Yeah, totally fair. And I mean, I would just say the other thing, and for the people mad about Paul Maurice for stepping away, like, let's be clear here. Paul Maurice stepped away not because he was looking for a better job. It was for his own personal mental health and well-being. He was just in a place where a guy who loved the sport for his entire life wasn't enjoying coming to the rink anymore. And if some people have a problem with that, I can understand why. But it wasn't that Paul Maurice was planning to quit and take the next job. Paul Maurice would have been just as happy to ride into the sunset. But then after being away for the game, he found out that there was another opportunity that made sense for him. And now he's taken absolute advantage of it. And we saw it at the podium. I mean, it's not all about what is at the podium, whether it's the way he reacts in his handshakes with Jamie Kompon or the way he's at the podium talking about Sasha Barkov being at a bar mitzvah. I mean, we weren't seeing a lot of jokes from Paul Maurice in December of his last season, right? So, and that's the thing for me, good for Paul that he found the love of the game, because this is a guy who loved the game more than anyone that I've been around in covering the sport for the last 20 plus years. And it wasn't a joyful time for him, to borrow the line of Claude Noel at the end of his tenure with the Jets. And, just to your point, I know you asked about it, we talked about it with Scotty. If you saw Mark Chipman, his reaction the day that Paul announced his resignation, or formally announced it, he wasn't being fired by the guy who owns the team, based on how emotional he was when Paul announced he was leaving.
Yeah, when people get divorced, they look upset too, man.
Huss, no, totally fair. I'm not saying that Paul Maurice may have lasted the year, that he might not have been in danger of being let go at some point. He wasn't being let go on December 17th. That much we're clear on. And I don't think a firing was imminent, but, for both sides, for the coach himself and for the team, they needed a new direction, and now they need a new direction again, and not necessarily behind the bench, but in terms of the roster construction and how they proceed moving forward, and how they get to that point is going to be a very interesting time here, at a time when there's a ton of NHL teams that are looking to change direction a little bit. And hey, the other part too, like there's been a lot of people throwing some old tomatoes in the direction of the Vegas Golden Knights, Huss, for some of the decisions that they've made. Some of those people might be taking a few of those comments back when it comes to 2 weeks from now.
Well, we'll in 1 week from now, I think we'll be getting ready for Maurice and the Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights, and I'll look forward to talking to you then. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the heat, and may they be straight and the putts be dropping on the Weeb's World Manitoba Golf Tour.
Thank you, my man. It's been great to get it started. And there was a 3 birdie round involved in the last week here, but it also included 2 triples and a quad. So we're trying to sort some things out here in the early stages of the season, Huss.
You're a guy that had 2 holes in one round, and let's just say didn't sniff far in that one.
Did not keep it in the low 80s. Man. Did not keep it in the low 80s. That's true. But
let's get out for a round soon at Breezy, buddy.
Can't wait. Great lid for sure. And look forward to getting out. Have a great weekend. Thanks for having me. And let's see what happens in the next week here. But
are you going to the Hoops game tomorrow?
I don't believe so. No, I will be watching Game 5. I gotta be on call for the Weeb's World Sunday morning column, Huss. But I'm sure it's sellout. That sounds fantastic. I hope it's a great event. And it's always fun to see sports at this time of year. People are thriving, and good to see people getting behind.
We're going to a Sea Bears game in the future this season, even if you can't make the opener.
It's a deal. And hey, also too, I missed it last weekend. I know you were out at the ballpark. Looked fantastic. Great crowd for the opener. And hey, it's good. I know you had Greg Taggart on, one of the great managers and personalities of the independent baseball circuit. And it's just a fun time of the year, and we know that football will be getting going soon enough here.
Well, there's a 6:30 game tonight, and it's 30 degrees outside. If you don't have a wine tasting or something like that, text me because I think you know where I'm going to be tonight.
Right on, my man. Have a good one. We'll talk soon.
Take it easy. There's Ken Wiebe. Yes, speaking of the Gold Eyes, they are back at it all weekend long against Sioux Falls, and we could not have better weather for this. And, well, I'll tell you before marbles about a big announcement coming from our friends at Little Brown Jug that's going to make certain sports fans very, very happy. However, I can tell you right now that generic lager, which is such a great addition to the Little Brown Jug family, that's available at the ballpark. And if you're out there and you're looking for a refreshing light beer, I would suggest jump on the generic tonight. And hey, of course, Little Brown Jug patio open right now down on William Avenue, and you can get a bunch of new beers that have launched. They've got the Radler that's out right now, but I'm definitely suggesting the generic. That is, I think, now my official go-to summer beer. I think it has now been decreed, and look for that blue can at the ballpark tonight, and you might see me holding one. Shout out to our friends over at Little Brown Jug, and look for it coming up at a certain football stadium when fans are coming up. Hey, Princess Auto, speaking of the Gold Eyes, great sponsors of both the Gold Eyes and the Blommers, and your boys here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them at one of two Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, or shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Marbles are coming up in a few minutes. And don't forget, next week for marbles, Joe over at Consolidated Supply, the irrigation master himself, has hooked us up with a pair of bomber tickets for the marbles coming up next week. But we will have a marbles race right away. We're going to quickly talk Sea Bears with Kirby Schepp, but keep an eye, on the chat for when you're going to want to enter the marble race. But Consolidated Supply, Joe, leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, golf carts, and other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchen options. And of course, they are the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Pop by and see them at Consolidated Supply's new showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. Listen, the gang at Royal Sports is, of course, busy. It's beautiful outside. It's time to get outside. It's time to dominate spring and summer. A massive selection of incredible bikes, cruisers, mountain bikes, BMX style. They've got them all. Pop down and see Royal. And if you have not tried disc golf, if you're looking for a fun activity that you can play with friends pretty much at any point throughout spring and summer, get on down to Royal. Not only do they have a huge selection of discs, but they've also got portable targets that you can bring out to the lake with you, for instance, if you want to do it. Not to mention the best selection of licensed merchandise for all of your favorite teams around the world. Royal Sports, spring stock arriving daily, soccer, baseball, softball, tennis, and more. In addition to bikes, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And just before we get ready for the Sea Bears opener, don't forget, Boston Pizza's there for you. Home of the Jays broadcast. Always a great place to watch Blue Jays baseball. And we do have another Game 5 tomorrow. So you'll be able to get on down to BP and enjoy ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and the latest from the BP feature menu. And heck, might be a good place to pregame for tomorrow's Sea Bears opener down at Canada Life Center. And heck, if you're staying in, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, pay attention. In just a minute, if it hasn't happened already, we'll open up marbles registration. But before we do that, getting ready for the Sea Bears opener, no better person to talk about it with than our good friend Kirby Schepp, who's got a very interesting trip in his coaching career coming up, but he kind of joined us a little earlier to talk about the Sea Bears opener and what that means for hoops in Manitoba and give us a little bit of an insight to the team. Here it is. Kerb, what is up, man? It's great to have you back on Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
Yeah, been a while, guys. Good to be back with you talking some hoops.
Well, you know what I mean? You've always been my go-to guy talking basketball, and there is a lot going on in the NBA playoffs, but pretty exciting time for the basketball community in Manitoba as we get a pro team back and the Sea Bears get going on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's been, I don't know how many, over 20 years for sure since the Cyclone left. And, they've had those sort of transient leagues come and go. Previously, Winnipeg Thunder. We've had a number of bouts here. CBL seems to really have some roots here and is sticking nationally. And certainly was a great time for David Asper and his group to get on board and, bring a group in. And I think, the enthusiasm for the game is really great right now. And it's just a great time to kick it off.
No doubt about it. And we had Mo Khan, a good friend of ours that comes on the show from Montreal, and he's done the play-by-play for the Montreal team for the last couple of years. And we sort of got a bit of a primer on the CBL as a league now going into its fifth year. But as Winnipeg is the newbies, I mean, from someone that has been so involved in basketball here in the province and in Canada, how important is it to have a national league, as well as that gives opportunities to young men like a couple former Bisons or current Bisons, actually, that are going to be playing with the Sea Bears?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge in terms of just the growth of the game, too. I mean, if you look around the world, every country has their own domestic league of some kind, right? And sometimes those leagues link with other countries' leagues and Premier League or, Euro leagues, different things like that. And we've never really had that stable component. Obviously there are challenges with geography that other countries don't have in Canada in terms of making a league and timing. And I think, the people that put the CBL, Mike Morreale and his group put together this league. And I really think that they did a great job in terms of the structure of it, how it sort of spread across the league, but also making it a summer league as well, where a lot of guys, because the talent in Canada has really taken off in the last 15, 20 years. So now we have enough sort of local flavor to make it a really, really good league right around the world. But these guys can play overseas and play in other countries, sometimes NBA G League, sometimes Euro League, different places around the world, but also play in this league kind of in their off season, I guess. And great for Canada basketball, but also great locally. As you sort of hinted, now we've got, there's a bunch of guys whose photos are behind me on the wall here, and who are former pros of ours that are playing overseas, and they get a chance to now come home and play. And even current players, as you mentioned, that Simon Hildebrand was their number one draft pick, and so it's just a great opportunity for our guys to sort of get their feet off the ground and build their future pro career, but also, play at home in front of friends and family for those that already are pros.
Well, speaking of Simon Hildebrand, I think for Sea Bears fans that get out this weekend to see the home opener and follow the team throughout the first year, they'll become very familiar with Simon if they haven't already from his exploits as the Rookie of the Year and the incredible debut he had with the Bisons. You mentioned first draft pick ever by the Sea Bears, and it looks like he's going to be in the lineup right now. Talk to us a little bit about the player that he is, but also what this sort of an opportunity does for a young man that'll come back and be a leader for your squad next year in U Sports.
Yeah, I mean, Simon's a local guy, NBCI product who then went away to, some post-grad and prep situations in Ontario and the U.S. and then came back home. So, and it was certainly, he had opportunities other places and wanted to stay at home, and it worked out very, very well for him. He's a unique talent. I mean, we're talking about a 6'9" guy who can really shoot the ball, play on the perimeter, play multiple positions. He's really, what the modern game is now, which is a positionless player. That's certainly how we use him, and we use him all over the floor in different roles, and he'll showcase that, for the Sea Bears. And I think for him, it's about getting a taste. I mean, he knows he's aspiring to be a professional basketball player. I think he certainly has the talent, and he'll certainly get there, when he's done his education, done here with the Bisons. But this gives him a taste, right? And this gives him a taste of what being a pro is like, and starts to sort of build that resume now. And certainly for us, him getting this experience and, learning every day from different guys that have been around and already played a lot of professional basketball. And it can only help him sort of as he moves forward into next year. And, we're just really proud of him. We're really happy that he's getting this opportunity. And think it's going to be great for him moving forward.
Well, looking forward to seeing him and the rest of the squad. The first player ever signed by the club, another local product, the beast from River East himself, Chad Posthumus. We had such a great time chatting with him. He seems to be loving it, being, for better or worse, the face of the franchise, at least before things get going. He's had a very interesting run. Since growing up here, this is another guy that's been around the world, that's played one in this league, and probably a pretty great guy to start this franchise with, a big guy from Winnipeg that has the accolades that Chad brings to the table.
Sure. It was there's a number of local products, I think, that, I think they're still targeting that, could become a piece of that. But, Chad was certainly a key for signing, who'd played a few years in the CBL already and has played in a number of pro leagues around the world. It's one of the beauties of basketball is, and I'm, certainly fortunate enough to do this, is it can take you everywhere in the world because it's a global game, and it's done that for Chad. And so, yeah, he gets a chance to finally, play in front of a home audience or home crowd. And, probably as he moves towards the end of his career. And it'll be certainly great for him to, get on the court, and he's a big, strong dude. He's going to rebound. He's going to be a presence in the paint for them. So as they hold off, I know that they've got their eyes on, a couple other local products that could be big. Keith O'Meara for one, Bison alumni Jared Ogamemi Jackson. He's a Garden City kid who went away to Calgary. Both those guys are playing in France at a high level of basketball. They're both high-level pros, and their league won't end until mid-June. So I know Sea Bears are hoping to add them sort of partway through the season. But yeah, that local flair is certainly huge for selling the product and building a connection with the community.
I know you've been around practice and kind of following the team. We've talked about Chad and certainly about Simon Hildebrand. Any other guys catch your eye at the practice that maybe fans will be introduced to in a big way when the season gets going?
Yeah, we'll see how it works out. I know I'm totally biased here, but I'm anxious to see how Justice Aline does. There's other Bison alum who's played a few years of pro, and then took some time off for family and personal reasons, and then is back in it a little bit. So I'm getting my names wrong right now. They're New Mexico kid Teddy.
Teddy Buckets.
Yeah, Teddy Buckets.
Teddy Allen.
He can shoot the ball. He's going to be a really interesting piece for them, and then they'll see. I think there's probably going to be a period where they're going to have to feel it out a little bit, right? Because these are all new, things. One of the challenges with some of these leagues is, these guys are getting paid on a per game basis, right? So you can't tell them to. It's tough to bring them in 3 months before and really see what you got, right? So they've had a week of 2-a-day training camps going at it hard here, and so I'm sure there'll be a feeling out and a growing process of sort of Coach Taylor seeing what he's got and making adjustments up and down the lineup here as they go through their first few games here.
We had a great chat with Coach Taylor last week getting ready for the season, and really loved his energy. We'll see what happens when the team hits the court. But from a Bison coach perspective, but also a local guy that's been so involved in basketball your entire life, how significant is this to have a team hopefully get off to a great start and be part of a young and growing league for basketball in this city, and the trickle down to all the grassroots levels?
Right. It's nice. It'll be what it really significant is, if it sticks. And certainly, we're on pace, I think, to break the CBL attendance record in game 1 here on Saturday. That's a really great start. The league's got pretty good roots already. I think where it'll really start to have an impact, I think, is this becomes like a league as much as they've had their own challenges, but like as stable as the CFL, right? In terms of a long-lasting institution in our country that's national, that goes right, from coast to coast, and really has its roots and starts to build some generational fan base, right?
It's time for that to happen, though, huh?
Yeah, there's no question. When you look at the popularity of the game, and I think the other key piece is the talent level. So nationally, we always haven't had necessarily the talent to sustain this league. We had to be very import heavy, and that's not the case anymore. Like we can have 70% of the roster be Canadians and be high level pros because we have, I don't know the number off the top of my head. If I were to guess, there's 60 to 80 guys playing Canadians playing professional basketball somewhere else in the world at any given time right now. So we have that depth of talent. So I think the time is right for that.
Kirby Schepp's with us. Kirb, you've got some interesting itinerary coming up. I mean, over the years, we've talked about, the work you've done with Canada basketball and up here. Tell us about this international opportunity that's going to take you out of the city for the next little while.
Yeah, leave this weekend and traveled a little bit. Sort of working around the Bison schedule when guys are writing exams and different sort of downtimes in the season. And I've taken a position with the Egyptian Basketball Federation with their national team program, where I'm the director of their youth and coaching development. So I develop some resources and build their game a little bit from the grassroots level. But I also coach their international team program. So, work closely with their senior team and a number of their federations to build out their program, build alignment between their age group teams and their senior teams. And so I'm coaching their U19 World Cup team this summer. So I was just there in April doing some training camp in Cairo and Alexandria. And I leave Sunday and we start our final phases of training camp in Cairo, and 2 weeks of that and a week in France for some prep and, a little bit of training. And then we're in Hungary for World Cup. So should be a fun summer. And, anytime you can compete in a world championship, it's a pretty special experience. So I'm really looking forward to it.
What's basketball like in Egypt? And did the players speak English? What's the communication like with the squad?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting challenge. It's they do speak English for the most part. There's one or two guys that struggle. Arabic's obviously their first language, but they're and there's a bit of a basketball language. So we're doing pretty well with that piece. And most of the kids go to English speaking high schools or American international schools or things like that. So their English is pretty good. There's some challenges with for sure, but what I'm finding that's really fascinating is the team building aspect of it, where all those moments where you're on the bus, you're at team meals, you're at the downtime before practice, and you're sitting around with the guys, and you take for granted how much of that time is making connections with athletes, and that would really take time with. And it's not right now for me, because when they're over a team meal, they're all speaking Arabic. And I don't know what the hell's going on, right? And they're not talking to me. And so unless they address me directly, it's always in Arabic. So this is probably the biggest challenge I have in terms of, building our squad and, building out that team dynamic that I certainly rely on. So, but we'll find a way, and certainly great people. That's what I would say is my Egypt synopsis is, just incredible people, right? So I'm sure I can share a few stories.
Is it a big sport there? What's the talent like? I mean, how many players do you have to choose from? I mean,
it's a big country, right? So they're over about 100 million. Just in Cairo alone, Cairo's complete insanity is 20 million people, right? So you can imagine what that city's like. But I mean, soccer, team handball are big sports, right? But basketball's probably second to third on that list. And it's growing, it's popular. And I think, I was in April, I was there for the BAL, which is the NBA has created a Basketball Africa League, and I attended those games. And the future of the game is in Africa. Like, it's absolutely exploding. And then the amount of talent there. And it was pretty exciting thing to be a part of, actually. So it's we're just going to see more and more talent coming globally, which is it's just great for the game.
Hey, under 19, is Victor Wembanyama eligible for this tournament? And listen, I have to ask you just about him quickly because, and I was watching the lottery and whatnot, and I mean, there's very respected people talking about him being like the best prospect, and again, prospect that's ever going to be picked in the NBA. And I kind of step back, but the more I read about this guy, it's this is a whole nother level of potential for this young man.
It's incredible, and I worry about the pressure that he's under. So, and to the short answer to your first question was yes, this is his age group. What's the date? On the 15th, we'll be playing the French national team in Orleans, France, just outside of Paris. I would be shocked if Victor Wembanyama was playing. I believe he's still playing on his French Pro A team, but it'd be still pretty cool. That would be the one time in my life where I would probably dream team it and take a photo pregame with an opponent. And I'll text you that picture if I get one. But yeah, it's pretty special. But you're right. It's I'm hesitant because the pressure these guys are under, and you never know, injuries could come in and fit and different things. And so, and you emphasize prospect, I think, very, accurately, because prospect just means that, his ceiling is really, really high. So I think even his floor is high too, but there's still a range there. But you're right. His ceiling is probably as high as just about anyone that's ever played the game. So I would maybe put Lou Alcindor in that group. The old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's a 7'5" shooting guard. So yeah, it's pretty incredible, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool though.
Done. But hey, just before we go, I know you've been paying attention to the playoffs. Are the Celtics going to be the first team to come off the mat down 0-3 and win a series?
So I would have said no chance. There's no question. I would have said 0.0% chance here. But at the same time, I think the real deciding factor here is injuries. I also don't know if the Miami Heat beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round if Giannis doesn't get hurt. So injuries play a role for sure. Now they're down Gabe Vincent now. They were already down Tyler Hero. They're already down Victor Oladipo. These are all very similar positions. That could swing the series, right? Not only the building momentum, but they're not the same team that they started the playoffs with right now. And do I think it's going to happen? No. I think they probably get it tonight, but I would not be surprised if the Celtics come back and be the first team ever to come back from 3-0. So,
hey, I just have to ask you about the Joker over there in Denver and what the Nuggets have been doing. I know there's a lot of talk. I think there was sort of Joker fatigue why he didn't win the MVP. He's, I think, proving who the MVP is right now. And wasn't he a second-round pick, late in the second round? How did he become this superstar? And are the Nuggets the team to beat regardless of who wins this series in the East?
Yeah, he was always this guy. One of the challenges, of course, is Denver's just not on national TV that much, right? They're just not, so it's people don't necessarily see what he does on a nightly basis. He also doesn't care about MVPs. So, towards the end of this season, they had the 1 seed locked up and he kind of coasted a little bit into the end and doesn't really give a crap about, whether he wins that award or not. But he's a special talent. And he's the best player in the world right now. I think it's hard to deny that. There's and it's just how much he makes his teammates better. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of, Magic Johnson back in the day where, it's hard to, Magic Johnson would finish the game with, 18 points and 17 assists and 15 rebounds. But you couldn't really quantify what he did for the team, right? To the way Joker does. So it's pretty cool. And I'll tell you what, even for the casual basketball fans, you turn on Denver Nuggets game and watch Nikola Jokic play, and it's fun. There's no one like him. He's so unique. I don't think we're going to see too many other guys like him, in the future. And just enjoy watching him right now.
He's got a pretty good running mate with one of the top Canadians in the NBA as well, Jamal Murray.
Absolutely, Jamal Murray. And Jamal Murray's better in the playoffs. He's been absolutely incredible. And yeah, it's pretty cool. That's pretty special. And his story is fantastic, where he's come back from injury and tore. He had that great run in the bubble, then he tore his ACL, and took him ACL injury is at least a year and a half to get 100% back, and now he's back, right? So he's back to what he was, and they're quite a duo. So pretty cool to see. We're going to see Canadian, playing in the finals on a real big stage and playing a big role. So
I cannot wait for it, and looking forward to Sea Bears season, and of course, looking forward to seeing you and the Bisons back on the court next year at the U of M. In the meantime, we'll let you get back to packing. Consider Winnipeg Sports Talk big fans of the Egyptian under-19 team. We will be pulling for you, and hopefully when you're done and back in the city, we can have you back, talk a little bit about the experience and a little more hoops on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Kirby, always great having you on the show.
Love to, guy. I'll have a million stories about Egypt. I already got a few, so I'd love to share them with you.
Have a great trip, travel safely, and good luck out there.
Take care.
All right, great stuff with my guy Kirby. Best of luck to him out with the Egyptian team. And all you Hoops fans will see you tomorrow at the Sea Bears home opener. Listen, we've gone long, so we'll get to marbles right away. Last call for marbles. Remis is going to crank that close in just a second. So if you just popped in and you're late right now, you got just a couple seconds to get those in, and we'll close it right away and get to the race. Got to thank our friends at Aikens Lake. Man, this is great fishing weather. Wouldn't mind being out at Aikens right about now, to be perfectly honest with you, with this gorgeous weather. But if you are looking for a world-class fishing experience here in Manitoba, where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg and enjoy world-class fishing and even more world-class hospitality, Aikens Lake is the place. There is absolutely nothing like the Aikens experience. Find out more online, aikenslake.com, or hit up our pal Pitt Terren on Twitter at Aikens Lake for more information on what is available for remaining booking dates for 2023, or get ahead of the game and start booking for 2024. And of course, no live racing until Monday night, but AS Downs is back at it. But this weekend, Food Truck Wars. So if you're looking for something to do, bring your appetite down. And our friends at Little Brown Jug are also sponsoring and hosting the beer garden at Food Truck Wars. Perfect weather for that as well. And I did promise a little bit of news from Little Brown Jug. Got an email last night from Tanner. Great news, Bomber fans. Little Brown Jug is going to be working with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this year, and you will be able to get LBJ beers at Bomber games. So looking forward to that new development at the games. Great stuff from the Bombers, and of course, our friends over at Little Brown Jug. And of course, Gold Ice tonight, 6:30 p.m. start, home all weekend. 32, 29, 32 these next 3 days. If you haven't been out to the ballpark, summer's already here. Get on down there. Tickets available at goldeyes.com. All right, while Remis gets us ready to drop the marbles, let's get over to the Coolbet lines. And by the way, shout out to my boys over at Coolbet. We've got a big announcement that we're going to be making that I think will be very popular with Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners. For a big event coming up in June. We'll tell you about that next week on the program. No hockey tonight and no baseball tonight. We got to wait till tomorrow for both those games. But tomorrow, the Heat, looking to avoid being the first team to ever blow a 3-0 lead in the playoffs. It's now going to Game 6. This is Game 7 for Miami. Miami's an underdog at home, though, plus 121, and the Celtics minus 143 in that game tomorrow. And as far as the Stars and the Golden Knights go, Vegas is a home favorite of minus 138 to get the job done and book a ticket to take on Pomo and the Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. Dallas tomorrow, 117. Full slate of games tonight in the majors. We do have the Toronto Blue Jays taking on the Minnesota Twins down in Minnesota. A lot of Winnipeggers will be there for this series. Twins plus 132 underdog. Jays are favored. And, man, they need a win. Minus 149. Kevin Gausman's on the mound. I've been struggling making bets, much like the Jays have been struggling getting wins. I am looking at one, though, tonight. Kevin Gausman over 8.5 pitching outs at minus 115. Jumping on that. We'll throw that one out on our daily pick for Coolbet Canada in the lock shop. And, by the way, all you Bomber fans and CFL fans, if you want to see something listed when it comes to the season props and futures for it, they've got a bunch of player specials. Right now, they've got the most outstanding player up right now. But we do have a special one right now, over or under 3.5 quarterbacks hitting 4,000 yards. But if you want a particular player prop or something like that, send me a tweet at Hustlerama, and I'll do my best to get that one on the board next week as we get ready for the season. And I do believe there's nothing more degen than betting on the CFL preseason. But if that's your jam, Ottawa 3.5-point favorites tonight at home to the Montreal Alouettes. Coolbet.com is where to do it. Use the promo code WST if you're jumping on for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit over at Coolbet. All right, I apologize. Although the conversation with Ken was so good, Reem, that we didn't want to end it early, and as sometimes happens in the beauty of this format, sometimes we went a little long. That being said, you know what time it is. It is time for marbles. Can we get right into Tristan Rivers' music and then figure out where we're going to go?
Yes, I'm about to pick the song. Here, I'll do this one. This is what I'm going to do. Ready?
Perfect. Summertime.
It's Friday, another week of work's gone by. You deserve to treat yourself, maybe an ice cream cake or a bottle of rye. Phone the whole day in so that you can't deny. Why use effort even for pleasure? Your blind luck to try. It's time to do a marble race. No skill separating best two words. Marble race. Just like marbles with the punctuation first. Marble race. Don't spare will you will suffer only say. Marble race. Your marble points to race. Let's go!
All right, marbles time to finish up another great week on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Short week. Hard to believe it's already Friday, but I'm here for it. May have a generic lager from Little Brown Jug a little later on and thinking about the Gold Eyes game tonight. But nothing starts until the marbles are finished. Remo, how many marbles do we have in today?
Yeah, well, first up, that was the Foo Fighters theme for anyone because they're back. They announced over the weekend Josh Freese is the new drummer replacing Taylor Hawkins, who unfortunately passed away. Was that last year? And they're actually playing shows again, which is kind of cool. I'm hoping that they reschedule the show that was supposed to be here and that was canceled. But nice to see them back. Nice to see them back. But how many marbles? We got 183 in right now.
Nice.
We had 180 from the Chad, and then added in Nigel Dawes. Great appearance this week.
That was fun.
And then Ken got a marble for delaying the show today. That was a good one. Good chat with Ken. And the Winnipeg Sea Bears get a marble. So we'll have to present it. I don't know who to who, but
I think we should probably give one to Maurice. He deserves one.
oh, I didn't do Paul Maurice. Okay, I'll add it again.
Yeah.
We'll have to mail it to Florida.
Throw in it. You know what? Wouldn't that be something? Paul Maurice, congratulations on winning the Stanley Cup. But more importantly, congratulations on winning a hoodie from Winnipeg Sports Talk for a marble victory. And by the way, shout out to our friends at Shipham and Associates, great friends of the program who have got the hoodies in. I've got all the sizes. So again, there's still a couple people that I owe one to. If we haven't got in touch with you, maybe you missed it, send us an email. And when you won, and we'll get that done hopefully at some point next week. All right, where are we going to go today?
Yeah, we go back to the coils of power. We haven't coiled for a while.
Oh, I'm down with the coils of power. Yeah, that is one that we've, I think, was quite popular early on, and we definitely haven't done it in a while.
Sure, I'll do the coil.
All right, everyone, let's get it on. Marble race, WST style, Friday afternoon. And don't forget, shout out to Joe from Consolidated Supply. Next Friday, we will also have a pair of tickets for the Bomber Home opener the following week. All right, 184 marbles in. One will be champion. We are in the coils of power today for a steamy Friday afternoon in the Peg. Let's drop them in the coils of power on WST. Oh, yes, and in chat mentioning the T-Birds. Brad Lambert, thank you, Phyllis, for the reminder. Tomorrow, their first game in the Memorial Cup. Oh, the big guy, Tyson Ducharme with the early lead. Jeff Doiron and Moose 3 so far, but Tyson with a great start early. in the coils of power. Let's see what happened. Now, I don't remember this one. Is there spots where people can get thrown over the top rope by the electricity or something on this one, Reem?
I'm seeing like laser beams shoot out, and I don't know if they're like teleporting laser beams or elimination laser beams. We'll have to keep our eyes open to what happens here.
No doubt about it. Right now, it looks like Tyson slowed down a little bit. Moose 3, I think, took them in. Greg M just got thrown over the top rope. I'm not sure how that happened to Greg, but he did get it. All right, Moose 3. Oh, somebody else just went down too.
Ryan Dry. Oh, there goes Ken.
Ken! Oh, poor Ken. Just got dropped. All right, we're coming down these coils. It looks like, I think Moose 3 is the leader. Oh, Will Sutton and another one. Rob Kane, Gonzo. Sorry, Rob. Okay, Moose 3, Eric, FRW. Oh, Moose 3 just got stopped. Here comes FRW rolling through. Laurent Grattan. Oh, this is a good one. There's lots of stops and starts. Oh, Chuckster just got thrown over the top rope. All right, we're getting into some more marbles. And Tony Pop, I don't know where Tony just came from, but he's now right on. I think this is pretty much a dead heat from the ones on the right and the left. Although, no, I think the right side coils are big. Todd M thrown over the top rope. Okay, I'm pretty sure C Jury right now is our leader. Can anybody catch C Jury? That would definitely be a new winner for us. C Jury's gotten out in front of everyone. Over the top rope. Oh my God. What a disaster for C Jury. Paul Maurice gone. Kitty Pup. Can Kitty Pup get it done? Yes. Oh man, that was an awesome race. We got to do the coils of power a little bit more often. I am stunned how C Jury fell off. It looked like it was over, but then it wasn't. And Kitty Pup 1000 is the winner. We'll go through the entire list just so everyone can check out. I think Shorn's back from Sweden, so he probably joined us on regular Central Time today. But shout out to Kitty Pup 1000 for the win. Send us an email, Kitty Pup, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com. We'll be in touch, and you can pick up that hoodie some point next week. Top 10 went like this. Tony Pop, Zach C., Uncle Dizzo, Interim Coach, Paul Carr in 6th, Cruiser 24, Ernie Waldner 8th, Yakman 9th, and THP Power 10th. Overall, we'll run down. Oh, there's Kabilas. Pretty strong performance by Jeff, 16. Doesn't usually get that high up. Ardis, great name, 20th. What do we got here? Winnipeg Chaster in the top 25. Phyllis, 29th. Nicely done, Phyllis. And Chris Vermette, another regular. Always there. Brant Batters. What's up, Brant? Hockey guy Jeff. Elliot, top 50. Pretty good. Your boy Mitch Klassen. Lego guy, 57th. All caps Kyle. We met all caps Kyle. We met all caps Kyle at the Kenny and Rennie event, 62nd. There's Bardo, Doug Phil, Pretty and Pionk. See the WST audio gremlin. Our guy, Bravo Bry. What's up, Bry? Doobie's in there in 74th today. Let's see. We're going down. We've got Linton Reimer, Velveeta. Tyson Ducharme. Tyson, I don't know how you ended up finishing 93rd. You were like way out early. Nigel Dawes, debut in the marble race. Not bad. 107th. Candace at 116. The Sea Bears 117. Hopefully the Sea Bears do better in the game tomorrow than they did in the marble race today. Gene Okerlund, my man. 124th. Yes. There's Dallas Pauls. Hugh Wachenko. Hugh, you were due for 138th after winning a couple weeks ago. Hope you're enjoying that hoodie. Kibbins. What's up, Kibbins? Jerry Beluda. Boba Jet. Trevor Red Ranger. Whoa, Gitch. Gitch, 162nd. And SK, the final one to go across the board. And then everyone else that got knocked out. Oh, Tico Napoli, thrown over the top rope. Ken thrown over the top rope. Maurice also thrown over the top rope.
I was ready to mail his hoodie to Florida. I would have done it.
High profile casualties today in the marble race. Folks, awesome show today. And thanks to everyone for jumping on. Really enjoyed the conversations with Wiebe, Billeck, and Kirby Schepp. I'm pumped for this game tomorrow night. And I know obviously there's just the one hockey series going on. And, unfortunately the Ice aren't in the Memorial Cup. But Gold Eyes, home all weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday afternoon. 6:30 tonight, 6 tomorrow, 1 o'clock, I believe, on Sunday. Check goldeyes.com for a confirmation on that and get tickets. And, of course, tomorrow, I think we're pushing the full lower bowl for the Winnipeg Sea Bears debut game tomorrow night. Remo and I will be there. Look for us behind the scorer's table, evaluating the action and the new team and the vibe in and around it. I'm looking forward to talking about it, of course, on Monday's show. And Bomber exhibition action, you're going to have to click that CFL link to see it. The game tomorrow isn't on TV, right, Reem?
The Bombers, no, but it's on the CFL streaming service.
Free streaming. Dusty's going to be doing the game. And then next week's preseason game will be live on TSN from here. But even for a preseason game, it's so funny. Hockey preseason games are like, yeah, maybe I'll go. I think everyone's fired up just to get back to IG Field and have a great night. So let's get it on. Beautiful weather. Make the most of it, everyone. Get a little bit of time outside. Use that sunscreen. And take it easy on... stay hydrated, if you will, was heat warning is in effect throughout it. That's going to do it for us. We got to get these pods up. Maybe we'll see at the ballpark or at the arena on the weekend. Look at that. Heat warning in effect, 32 degrees. Bring it on. There's Winterpeg. Our friend Ashley over at CTV was just mentioning, no one ever talks about Summer Peg, but it is here right now. So anyways, enjoy it, everyone. Food Truck Wars out at AS Downs as well. Another great idea for the weekend. But one thing, no matter what you do this weekend, make sure to join us on Monday for another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Big announcement about a big event for us in June coming up that I think you'll be looking forward to. So we'll let you know about that next week. In the meantime, tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk. Make sure you're subscribed on the podcast feed. Put in Winnipeg Sports Talk wherever you get your pods and hit that red subscribe button on YouTube. And if you're with us on YouTube, thumbs up on the way out. Thumbs up to the weekend. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you Monday.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.